Senate will come to order. All those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those on the floor will please rise as we led in prayer by Grover Miller, Senate Assistant Doorkeeper. Please remain standing as we are led in prayer by the Senior Senator from the 6th, leading us in the reciting of the pledge. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, President. Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, you are our Creator, our Sustainer, our great Physician, and we give you praise and all the glory. Forgive us of our transgressions against you. Continue to cover us with your love and grace as we work to do that will. And Father God, I ask blessings for the senators and their staff to bring together their hearts and minds to accomplish the business of our great state of West Virginia. As Psalms 46 says, 46:10, it says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will exalt among all nations and in the earth." Father God, we ask all this in the presence and the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Senior Senator from the 6th.
If the members on the floor and the guests in the gallery will join me in reciting the pledge. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the journal.
West Virginia Legislature Senate Journal, March 3rd, 2021. The Senate met at 11 a.m. Senator Blair, Mr. President, in the chair.
The Senator from Monongalia requests unanimous consent for further reading. The journal be dispensed with and the journal be approved. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Further reading the journal is dispensed with and the journal is approved. Introduction of guests. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it is your pleasure and mine to introduce our doc of the day. In the rear of the chamber, we have with us Dr. Tom Linger from Charleston, West Virginia. The Senate wouldn't mind giving him a warm welcome.
Further introduction, Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Joining us in the virtual audience today is Philip Johnson from Paden City. He is a volunteer with AARP, West Virginia Capital Advocacy. As many of us know, during the session, the Redcoats have been a daily presence here in our galleries. While they are not here in person this session, we welcome their participation as part of our virtual audience watching the coverage from homes all across our state. We thank them for their advocacy and on behalf of the 50-plus West Virginians and their family. We make them welcome as a virtual visitor.
Further introductions. Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the House amended and passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 12 relating to local health department accountability.
The message will be received. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 12.
The Senior Senator from the 17th moves that the Senate concur with the House amendments to Senate Bill 12. Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The purpose of this bill is to have local health department accountability, to revise rulemaking, and to address statewide public health emergencies. The House removed the requirement that a member of the appointing authority serve as a non-voting ex officio member of the local health department board. That essentially turns it back the way it is now. The House revised the time frame from 45 to 30 days in which the County Commission must act on a rule and change this action from approval or disapproval, all in part, to the rules must be approved, disapproved, or amended and approved. The House included a new provision in this section applicable to a combined local board of health. So in some areas where we have one board serving multiple counties, the provision will provide that all rules of a combined local board of health shall be approved, disapproved, or amended and approved by each appointing entity within the 30 days of approval of the combined board of health. So each county can still make their own decisions. If one appointing entity approved and another does not approve a rule from a combined local board of health department, the rule is only in effect in the jurisdiction of the appointing entity of the approved rule. The House deleted language relating to the governor directing the state health officer. Rather, the state health officer would develop policies after the governor has declared the statewide public health emergency, and the requirement for additional direction from the governor is removed. I'd be happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I urge passage.
Is there discussion? Senator from Harrison.
Will the gentleman yield?
Will the gentleman yield? Senator yields.
Senator, I'm sorry, I might be getting old. I'm sure you said this. Does the bill remain that the authorizing body, the county commission or the municipality, has to okay any rule promulgated by the health departments?
That's correct.
It's good enough for me to vote no. Thank you, sir.
Further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is the Senate concur with the House amendments to Senate Bill 12. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the motion adopted. The question is now on passage of the bill as amended. All those will vote in favor, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 21 yeas, 11 nays, 2 absent, not voting, more than a majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
The clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of committee substitute for House Bill 2093 relating to exemptions for the United States Department of Veterans Affairs medical foster homes.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee of Health and Human Resources.
House Bill 2791 relating to enrollment and costs of homeschooled or private school students at vocational schools.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Education. Communications from the Executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration Senate Bill 39 prohibiting insurance coverage from requiring prior authorization for tests to stage cancer, and reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Eric J. Tarr, Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had under consideration Senate Bill 334, establishing license application process for harm reduction programs, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Michael J. Maroney, Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration committee substitute for Senate Bill 339, expanding types of agricultural operations that are protected from nuisance or other legal actions, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute for committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration Senate Bill 344 relating to credit for qualified rehabilitated buildings investment, and reports back committee substitute for same, and Senate Bill 383 relating to exempting certain organizations from property taxation, and reports back committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the 2 committee substitutes do pass. Respectfully submitted, Eric J. Tarr, Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Rules has had under consideration engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 368, authorizing DEP to develop reclamation of abandoned and dilapidated properties program, and has amended same, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended. Respectfully submitted, Craig Blair, Chair ex officio.
The report will be received. Senator from Brooke.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the bill.
Engrossed committee substitute.
Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request unanimous consent that the bill be read a second time.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will read the bill.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 368, authorizing DEP to develop reclamation of abandoned and dilapidated properties program. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. The Committee on Rules moved to amend the bill by striking out everything after the enacting clause.
Senator from Brooke.
President, I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. The bill, as it originally came to us, Senate Bill 368, amends several articles of the code, including the A. James Mansion Rehabilitation Environmental Action Plan. So we are aiming to rid the state of the jumbled jungles of junkery. Mr. President, the amendment adopted by the Rules Committee retains the original portion of the bill that provided for a program to allow reclamation of abandoned and dilapidated structures to improve and expand economic opportunities. The bill has findings and creates a special revenue account to accomplish the goals of the program. The purpose is to provide funding to counties and municipalities to clear abandoned and dilapidated structures and to defray costs to the DEP. That the bill also provided that once all landfills are closed, excess money in the Solid Waste Landfill Closure Cost Assistance Program Fund can be transferred to the newly created special revenue account. The Rules Committee adopted an amendment that would shift funding from the Solid Waste Landfill Closure Assistance Program incrementally implemented at 20 cents per ton starting July 1st, 2021, and continuing at 20 cents per ton per year for the next 5 years. These funds are to be distributed on a per capita basis to county or regional solid waste authorities. These funds to county and regional solid waste authorities are to be used for refuse cleanup, recycling programs, litter control, and other solid waste programs, furthering and expanding the original intent of 368 to improve communities. Happy to answer any questions, and the amendment really is the bill at this point. I urge adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
Is there discussion? Senator from Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to speak to the bill and the amendment to the bill. It strengthens the bill we started with, and I urge adoption of the amendment and the bill as written.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is the adoption of the amendment offered by the Committee on Rules. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be re-engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Your Committee on the Workforce has had under consideration Senate Bill 370, requiring certain documents that contain wage records be considered confidential, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Roland A. Roberts, Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Economic Development has had under consideration Senate Bill 445, reinstating film investment tax credit, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Chandler Swope, Chair.
The report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Pensions has had under consideration Senate Bill 456 relating to natural resources police officers retirement system, and Senate Bill 467 relating to West Virginia municipal police officers and firefighters retirement system, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass, but under the original double committee references, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Eric Nelson Jr., Chair.
The report will be received. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the second reference to Committee on Finance for both of these bills be dispensed. Neither of these bills have a financial impact upon the state budget.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Your Committee on Pensions has had under consideration Senate Bill 460 relating to Deputy Sheriff Retirement System Act, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Eric Nelson Jr., Chair.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Economic Development has had under consideration Senate Bill 464, Developing and Implementing Program to Regulate Source-Separated Organic Material Waste, and reports back to Committee Substitute for same, with the recommendation that the Committee Substitute do pass, but with the further recommendation that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Chandler Swope, Chair.
The report will be received and under the original double committee reference, the bill
Get ready to.
Senator from Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to move the bill to finance, to refer the bill to finance.
All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill will be now second reference to the Committee on Finance. Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill 559 through Senate Bill 560 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system.
Senior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bill 559 through Senate Bill 560 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 12 by Senator Smith applying to Congress to call convention to propose amendments allowing state legislatures to pass legislation overriding certain restrictive federal laws.
Under rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 13 by Senators Woelfel and Plymel urging Adjutant General to establish honor guard in each unit to perform military funeral honors.
Under rules of the Senate, this resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Resolution 12 by Senators Blair, Mr. President, Unger, Rucker, Trump, Azinger, Baldwin, Beach, Boley, Caputo, Clements, Grady, Hamilton, Ehlenfeld, Jeffries, Carnes, Lindsay, Maroney, Martin, Maynard, Nelson, Phillips, Plymel, Roberts, Romano, Smith, Stallings, Stover, Swope, Seipolt, Takubo, Tarr, Weld, Woelfel, and Woodrum, memorializing the life of John W. Small, Jr., West Virginia's longest-serving elected official and dedicated public servant.
Under rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day. Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 8, naming the Fire Chief Kenneth Jr. Russell Memorial Bridge.
The question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in support of the resolution. I'd just like to say a few words about Mr. Russell. Chief Kenneth Jr. Russell was a 38-year veteran of the Cabin Creek Volunteer Fire Department and ambulance service here in Exdale, West Virginia. He was the founder of the fire department and served for 30 years, also serving 8 years as president of the Cabin Creek Volunteer Fire Department Board of Directors. When Chief Russell began his fire service, he was a coal miner with the Carbon Fuel Company, and along with raising his family on a coal miner's salary, he would help finance the fire department. He was very successful in having both properties and materials donated to build the fire station, along with getting support from local surrounding coal companies. Chief Russell, he was very passionate about helping the citizens of Cabin Creek. He touched many lives during his 38 years on the fire department, and when he passed away this past August, he was given a firefighter service at the Cabin Creek Volunteer Fire Department. For all this, I urge adoption of the resolution.
Is there further discussion? If not, question before the Senate is the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 9, naming the Haney Family Veterans Memorial Bridge.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Senate Resolution 11, designating Sexual Assault Awareness Day in West Virginia.
Senator from Brooke.
I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 11, designating Sexual Assault Awareness Day in West Virginia.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the body for their indulgence here momentarily for this important resolution. Normally, everybody from this group would be here at the Senate with us today, but obviously, given what we're going through right now, they are not. And so it is good that we recognize the work that they do in our communities. You know, I've had the pleasure of working with them as a senator over the past several years. And I think that one of the stats as I was looking through the resolution really kind of struck out at me is that 1 in 6 women and 1 in 22 men in West Virginia will be victims of an attempted or completed forcible rape. 1 in 6 and 1 in 22, Mr. President. And so given those numbers, unfortunately, the chances of us here in this body knowing somebody who has been a victim of these crimes is probably fairly strong, and that's very unfortunate. We can pass all of the laws in this body that we want, Mr. President, that affect sexual assault, that address sexual abuse, but without the work of people like this that work with these victims and urge them to come forward when they have been a victim of one of these crimes, because it's a very unique, it's a very personal crime. It's not like having your credit card stolen. And victims of these crimes, Mr. President, oftentimes feel shame and guilt, and that something perhaps was their fault or it was something that they did, and that's not the case. And so these types of groups work with the victims and give them the confidence to come forward with their story and allow for people who are at the prosecutor's office to convict the individuals who perpetrate these types of crimes. And so I think it's very, very important work, because we could do everything that we possibly could on the front end of this, but without these types of people working in our communities, those cases don't oftentimes come forward, and that's very unfortunate. So I urge passage or adoption of the amendment or resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I echo the comments of the senator from Ohio, Brooke. In the last couple of years, probably the last 5 years, we in West Virginia, and particularly the Senate, we've become a leader nationally in the way we treat our victims of sexual abuse and sexual assault. It's been a bipartisan effort. We were one of the first states to last year enact a Sexual Assault Survivors Bill of Rights. Even on today's agenda, we have Senate Bill 434, which will make sure that when a victim is sexually assaulted, the police has training in terms of how to interview that person. The person who's just recently gone through an unbelievable and life-altering trauma. So let me just give a nod to my chairman of my Judiciary Committee that always gives these bills a good look, and to the Senate as a whole for, again, leading our state, leading the country in this regard, and I urge adoption of the resolution.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to also stand and thank the advocates who work on behalf of victims of sexual violence and echo the comments of the senator from Brooke County. I have worked alongside these individuals when children have been victims of sexual assault, when adults have been victims of sexual assault, and without the support of these advocates, it would be very difficult for these victims to make it through that process. These advocates work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are, or at least they're on call 24/7 throughout the year. Sex offenses and sex offenders don't take off for weekends and holidays, and this is always an issue, and these advocates are always available. When you look at the amount of funding that we provide for this, I think that's one area where we don't do a good enough job, and something that I would ask this body to be mindful of as this budget process goes forward this session. I was provided with data from what our neighboring states invest in sexual assault and rape crisis prevention services and intervention services. And when you look at Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Kentucky, they're all investing millions of dollars into this effort. Here in West Virginia, our line item is $250,000. That amounts to $4,500 per county each year. That's it. That's all that we're investing in this very important problem. And I think we can do better. I know we can do better. In 2012, the budget was twice that, and for whatever reason, it's been cut in half. These folks need our support. Victims need our support. This problem isn't going away. In fact, it's probably getting worse because of changes in our society. And so I would ask that this body be mindful of that during the budget process, and obviously I urge adoption of this resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
So further discussion. Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to add my 2 cents to this, and I'm grateful for all the awareness that we're bringing to this issue. There are 2 things, though, that haven't been said that I think are important. One is to point out the correlation between pornography and sexual assault, and that there is definitely correlation that has been found. And it is, I think, very important that we remember that when we are talking about helping these victims, that we also consider that. And second of all, you know, we have had many pieces of legislation regarding abortion here in West Virginia. You know, when we make abortion readily available to women, we need to remember that the perpetrators of sexual assault take advantage of how easy it is to get an abortion in order to hide the abuse that they are performing. So I appreciate that we are all interested in helping these victims and trying to prevent sexual assault in West Virginia, but just want to bring those up. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the resolution pass? All those opposed, or excuse me, all those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed will say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 263, permitting online raffles to benefit charitable and public service organizations. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 263 will amend 2 sections of our state code. They're both in Chapter 47. One is in Article 20, which is the article addresses charitable bingo, and the other is in Article 21, which addresses charitable raffles. And the bill changes the definition of each. We're adding in the definition of bingo, it says may be operated and played virtually over the internet using an online bingo software system or web application. And in the section in Article 21, which relates to charitable raffles, similar language, Mr. President, which will allow virtual raffles through an online raffle software system, web application method, or process for the purpose of conducting online raffles on the internet. Be happy to try to answer questions, Mr. President. Otherwise, I urge the passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 31 yeas, 1 nay, and 2 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
On this question.
Wait, one moment.
Nay, 2 absent, more than 2/3.
Got to back up. On this question, 31 yeas, 1 nay, 2 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting on this.
2/3 of those elected.
Of 2/3 of those elected.
Having voted in the affirmative.
Having voted into the affirmative.
I declare the bill effective from passage.
I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will now communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 332, providing procedure for West Virginia to select delegates to Article 5 Convention. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 332 would create a new article in our state code. It goes in Chapter 3, and it would be designated as Article 11A. And within that, there are 5 new sections, all addressing the procedures if and when an Article 5 Convention of the States is ever convened pursuant to a call from the states, call to the Congress under Article 5 of the United States Constitution. Mr. President, we have resolutions, Article 5 resolutions, almost every year here in the legislature, which we consider. I think we have passed one. Both houses of the legislature passed a balanced budget resolution. And we've had several others that have passed one or both houses of the legislature, and we may have more to look at this year. This bill addresses or seeks to address an issue that arises in the discussion and debate of those resolutions every time we have one that we consider. And the question is always, what opponents of the resolutions generally argue that there are not protections to prevent an Article 5 Convention of the States or the delegates to it from running away from the limited purpose of the call and creating a runaway convention that could make changes to or recommend changes to the U.S. Constitution that were not contemplated when the state passed the resolution. This bill seeks to address that argument and concern and fear. Section 1 in the law would create definitions, and it defines terms such as Article 5 Convention, delegate, amendment, unauthorized amendment. Section 2 of the bill would create a committee of correspondence for delegates within an Article 5 Convention regarding rules, amendments, processes, and procedures. And it provides that the legislature will do that, or the legislature may vest that authority and function in the Joint Committee of Government Finance. Section 3 is a prohibition against participation in an Article 5 convention that requires proportional representation. So all readers of Article 5 believe that if there is a convention, an Article 5 convention of states ever, it's going to be a convention in which every state has an equal vote. And this section makes it clear that delegates would not be authorized to attend or participate in any Article 5 convention where it's otherwise, where it's based on population. Section 4 of the Act would define delegate duties and responsibilities. And it would require that every delegate for West Virginia to an Article 5 Convention of the States take an oath that's set forth in subsection A of Section 4. And it provides in subsection B that the legislature shall certify in writing to the convention the delegates and alternates who've been selected. Subsection C says that delegates may not vote to allow consideration of or vote to approve an unauthorized amendment for ratification to the United States of the Constitution, and any such vote that's unauthorized is void by definition in the law. Subsection D says that any delegate casting a vote to allow consideration of an unauthorized amendment is immediately to be recalled by an official or committee authorized to recall the delegate. And subsection E says that any delegate or alternate is a public official and bound as such under the provisions of the West Virginia Governmental Ethics Act. And then finally, Section 5 of the new article provides a criminal penalty for violation of the oath of a delegate to an Article 5 convention, and it's a stout penalty. It's a fine of not less than $100,000 nor more than $500,000, and imprisonment in a state correctional facility for not more than 10 years. Mr. President, this bill is designed to provide the protection and structure and framework for the participation by delegates from West Virginia to any Article 5 Convention of States that would be convened pursuant to a call of the requisite number of states call upon Congress to require the initiation of such convention. I'd be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, I urge the passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, I stand in opposition to this bill not because it's not well-meaning, because it gives false security to those who would vote for an Article 5 convention. As I've discussed numerous years in this body, the only thing that is sure about an Article 5 convention is that it can be convened by the requisite number of states seeking the same issue. I don't have any problem with a balanced budget amendment. I don't have any problem with a term limit amendment for the United States Congress. I don't have any problem with term limits for this body and the body across the other side of the dome. What I do have a problem with is opening up our Constitution to wholesale change. And what is clear by the vast majority of legal scholars is that if we engage in an Article 5 convention, that it's most likely that our entire Constitution will be laid open to change by that body, and then the vagaries of a nationwide campaign to see whether or not it passes the vote of the states. Now, Justice Scalia said it best, that he was frightened by an Article 5 convention, and if he could have one under his terms, the only thing it would change would be Article 5, so that the states could limit an Article 5 convention to one particular issue like we try to do every time, like this bill is trying to do. But ladies and gentlemen, we're playing with fire here. I've told you many times, for those first-year folks in here, I can tell you that you're risking the entire democracy of our country. Because if they start an Article 5 convention and this bill has no effect, like a lot of legal scholars say it will not, then we've opened our entire country to change that we may never be able to recover from. I urge a no vote for the reason that it provides false hope and false security to those who choose the dangerous path of an Article 5 convention.
Is there further discussion? Senior Senator from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the Senator from Morgan yield?
Will the Senator from Morgan yield? Senator yields.
Thank you. Senator, I just have some questions because this didn't come through any committee I serve on. But so what I heard you say was that the delegates of this convention would take an oath to uphold the West Virginia Constitution, U.S. Constitution, and general laws. Is that correct?
That's correct. The oath that delegates to an Article 5 convention would be required to take is set forth in Section 4. I think it's Section 4. Let me turn to it. In Section 4A. Section 4, subsection 4A. That's correct.
And so in that oath, it's to uphold the West Virginia Constitution, U.S. Constitution, and general laws. And then a delegate, you also mentioned that the delegate should not vote on things that are unauthorized amendments, right? The delegate's not able to vote on unauthorized amendments?
That's correct. And that is also in Section 4. It's in subsection C. Delegates may not vote to allow consideration of or vote to approve an unauthorized amendment for ratification.
So they're not, consideration would be debating, voicing, giving opinion. That would be a consideration?
Well, you know, the fear, I think, one of the fears among people who argue that it would be imprudent ever to have an Article 5 convention is that the convention might veer or stray from the specific purpose or purposes for which it is called or convened. And this language is designed to say that West Virginia's delegates could not participate in doing that.
Right, so it basically tries to limit just the idea of these particular amendments that's been, I guess, authorized by the legislature to discuss, and anything that would come up other than that our delegates could not consider, could not vote on, could not speak on. Those are things that our delegates would be unable to engage in. Is that correct?
That's the way I would read it. It would preclude delegates from voting to allow consideration of or voting to approve an unauthorized amendment. So I don't think it's as broad as saying debate. In other words, I think a West Virginia delegate could stand up under this and say, wait a minute, this, I'll give you the hypothetical is, this Article 5 convention was called for purposes of considering a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. And the conversation now is veered off into something else, whatever, term limits. I think a West Virginia delegate could stand up and say, and debate and say, wait a minute, you've gone off the rails here. This is not what I was sent here or authorized to come here to do. What the prohibition is on voting to allow consideration or voting to approve such an unauthorized amendment. I don't think it would preclude a West Virginia delegate from saying, I believe what you're talking about now is unauthorized.
Okay, yeah. And then if they do violate this, it says here that if they violate this, then it could be they're committing felonies subject to fines between $100,000 to $500,000 and imprisonment not more than 10 years. Is that correct? It's an and.
That's what Section 5 says, correct.
So you could be fined between $100,000 to $500,000 and be imprisoned, but not more than 10 years. So it could be anywhere from a few days to 1 day to 10 years. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So these delegates take an oath to the West Virginia Constitution, to the U.S. Constitution. They're limited in their scope of what they can consider. If they go outside that limitation, they consider or they vote, then they would be subject, they would actually commit felonies, be fined and imprisoned. How does that align with the U.S. Constitution under Amendment 1, where it says Congress shall make no laws bridging the freedom of speech? How does that, I mean, they're taking an oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution, and the U.S. Constitution under Amendment 1 said so that no laws can abridge the freedom of speech. But if I speak as a delegate on something or exercise my speech by voting, I'm then subject to a law that's going to punish me for an oath that I took against with the U.S. Constitution. How does that all work?
Yeah, I don't see a conflict there, in that the prohibition that is contained in subsection C is upon voting. It's not specifically upon speech. So, you know, you could say speech is, that voting is speech, but we define as a crime now. Voting in someone else's district, voting if you're not registered to vote. You can't avoid a prosecution for that by saying, I was just exercising my free speech rights. I don't think it prohibits free speech. I think it prohibits voting in a certain way, and that certain way is beyond the authority given to the delegates by the state of West Virginia.
Okay, but if you tell a citizen, now I understand that if they vote in the wrong district, precinct, okay, we're playing the game here, but if you tell a citizen, you are not allowed to vote in this election, would you be violating that citizen's free speech?
If the citizen otherwise had the right to vote in the election,
That's right.
Arguably, yes.
Okay, so the idea...
There's a but the citizen and the delegate's right to vote, in this case, on behalf of West Virginia, is circumscribed and constrained by the resolution passed by both houses of the West Virginia legislature calling for the convention.
By consideration, when one considers something, discusses something, the way you consider or discuss, that's speech.
Agreed.
Either verbal or written. So even if a delegate goes out and starts, something comes up they're not authorized to do, and they start speaking on that particular topic, they could be in violation of this law.
I disagree. Because the prohibition is on voting.
But I thought you said consideration also.
I'm sorry? You thought
I also thought you said consideration and voting.
Voting to consider. The language is, if you look at D, C and D, delegates may not vote to allow consideration of. It's the actual act of voting.
I have it here. It says, this bill prohibits the delegates from considering any unauthorized amendments. And then it says the bill provides should a delegate vote on an unauthorized amendment, he or she may be recalled or replaced with the vote being declared void. And then it goes into its felony and so everything else.
And the oath,
Senator, you mean,
if you look at the oath in subsection A, starting at line 4, part of the oath that applies to your question is, I will not vote to allow consideration of or to approve any unauthorized amendment proposed. So it's upon the act of voting.
yeah. So I got here I see this. It says the legislature or an official or committee authorized pursuant of that code section.
So I don't think...
Hey, wait a minute, let me, if I could. It says here, in a delegate or an alternative, it's authorized to consider and vote to approve the recall procedure set forth in this subsection. So it says consider and vote. It says say not consider to vote.
Where are you reading now?
Let's see. It's on top of page 3, under subsection 311A-4, delegates' duties and responsibilities.
Which subsection?
B.
B is in boy?
B is boy, yes.
Yeah, so the first part of that is for the process for the legislature to certify who the delegates are who've been selected to attend.
And then it goes on to say that the amendments, a delegate or alternate is authorized to consider and vote to approve. So it says consider and vote. And consider is speech. I'd argue voting is speech too. So you're tying the hands of our delegates on a very constitutional right that that person has as a citizen.
If that's a question, I disagree completely. The law restricts, would purport to restrict and operate to restrict, in my reading, the act of voting in a way that has not been authorized by the state of West Virginia, the legislature of this state. And so I do not believe that that constitutes an infringement upon free speech, because a delegate attending an Article 5 convention would be required to take the oath and would be attending the convention solely for the purpose of voting in accordance with what the state of West Virginia has asked him or her to do by resolution.
So even in the subsection A, the oath is, I will not vote to allow consideration or to approve. I understand where you're saying that, but in subsection B, it distinguishes between it adds both consideration and vote. It's an and. So those are two distinct things. You consider something and you vote. You're saying that this bill would limit it and say they're prohibited to vote, and that's not against your free speech, and we may differ on that interpretation, because the voting is a way for citizens to exercise their free speech, right? Voting for constitutional amendments, voting for referendums, voting for candidates. That's a way in which citizens exercise their speech. But this also says consideration. That even goes into the aspect of discussion, debate, talking about.
All right, but in subsection B, it is not, as you see, the imposition of a specific restriction on the delegate. It is the legislature there in subsection B, or be the Joint Committee on Government Finance if it's delegated to that entity, to certify. That's about the certification that's made by the state of West Virginia with respect to what amendments a delegate or an alternate delegate is authorized to consider and vote to approve.
Okay, well so I mean, this is your interpretation that it wouldn't violate the First Amendment of a citizen's right for free speech.
I clearly believe that what you just said is true. I do not think this violates or offends First Amendment free speech
But
rights.
could you see where some people may be confused and have a different interpretation?
No, sir.
No, sir. So you don't see consideration as speech?
No, I don't think this infringes upon the free speech of delegates. Delegates who would get selected by the legislature to attend an Article 5 convention are there to vote in support of the proposal of amendments in a specific subject area outlined in a resolution that has been passed by both houses of the West Virginia legislature, and for no other purpose. And I don't see it as an infringement on their individual speech rights when they are there when a delegate is there as the representative of this state. The voice of the people would already have been expressed in a concurrent resolution passed by both houses of the legislature calling for an Article 5 convention. And that is that would be the only purpose of sending a delegate to such a convention.
So you see that consideration and voting is not speech?
It's interesting. And when we had this bill under consideration in committee, the senator from Randolph made a really good point and an analogy, which I think is appropriate here. And last year, I think it was just last year, 2019, the Supreme Court of the United States decided a case about restrictions that states had imposed upon federal electors, states electors participating in the Electoral College. And I forget which state or states it arose from, but those states were trying to address the problem of what do you do about faithless electors? Electors sent to the state capitol in December to cast ballots for whichever president, whichever party's candidate for president has carried that state. And it's happened throughout our country's history. That happened here in West Virginia in the last 40 years, where an elector didn't vote for the candidate of the party, the candidate who had carried the state. So some states, and we've had bills in West Virginia that would attempt to do this, have passed laws trying to prevent them from doing that. And the Supreme Court upheld it. The Supreme Court upheld that last year in a decision, said yes, a state can have a law that says if an elector deviates from what the law says, he can be recalled or his vote can be discounted or he can be replaced. So this is...
Yeah, but I don't know if they actually imprison them and put fines on them.
And I don't know whether there are criminal penalties attendant to the laws passed in those other states related to faithless electors, but...
I mean, if I'm thinking I'm exercising my constitutional right of free speech, and you're saying I'm violating that because of some law that you passed, and not only that, you're going to take my freedom away from me. We talk a lot about freedom here. You're going to take my freedom away from me, not just my speech, but my entire freedom by locking me up and basically putting fines on me.
Well, it would be like any other criminal case. The question would be, if it were a felony, it would have to be an indictment by a grand jury, a trial, and a determination by a jury of your peers that you have violated your oath and the requirements of this law.
I bet it does end up in there, because I've also taken an oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution. In there it's free speech, and now I'm going to be prosecuted because I feel I've exercised my free speech. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
No, and the only other thing I would say with respect to that is, it's when a person would assume the role and duties of a delegate, Mr. President, to an Article 5 convention, he or she would not be going there to exercise his own free speech rights. It's an office. If it's a public office, we make it clear in this bill that it's subject to the Governmental Ethics Act, and the person would go to an Article 5 convention not to exercise his personal, individual free speech rights, but to be the voice of the entire state of West Virginia in accordance with the concurrent resolution that had been passed by both houses of the legislature. I don't think this bill infringes in any way or offends the free speech rights of someone who would be a delegate to an Article 5 convention.
Further discussion. Senator from Randolph.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to expand a little bit on the case that the chairman alluded to, Chiafalo v. Washington. Not only did the Supreme Court decide that states had the right to bind electors to the choice that the state had made according to state law, because actually state laws can vary on that question, but the majority opinion was written by Elena Kagan. It was a unanimous opinion, and related to this question of free speech and whether or not it's an infringement upon somebody's free speech. That was actually the crux of the entire case, was that some electors said it violated their right to free speech to force them to vote a certain way. And what Kagan said, related to that, rather than just assume that party-picked electors would vote for the party's winning nominee, those states insist that they do so. She said that Article 2 was an 11th hour deal, which a lot of people refer to Article 5 as 11th hour deal because it was decided right at the very end. She says, although voting and discretion are usually combined, voting is still voting when discretion departs. So they had no issue whatsoever when dealing with a very similar case in which we had state actors filling a federal role, much like an Article 5 convention would be, saying that it's no infringement upon free speech to say that you're not allowed to vote on certain topics. And that's what this bill does. It doesn't say, as the chairman pointed out, that you can't speak of these topics. It says you cannot vote on these topics. You can't vote to authorize discussion. You can't vote for unauthorized amendments and so on. So it doesn't in any way hit free speech, and the U.S. Supreme Court in a unanimous decision said a year ago essentially that. Voting is voting, and speech does not always follow. Sometimes you can be bound.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're all sitting here speculating with very dangerous issues. It's particularly dangerous when you speculate about what the law says when you really have no ability to do so because of your experience or your training or whatever. But one thing that's clear, that the cases that are being referred to when it comes to electors is based upon violating the will of the people, the vote of the people. Here there will be no vote. Here it'll be decided under Article 5, which puts no restraints on the delegates. And we can pass all the laws we want. But if they're found to be in violation of the U.S. Constitution, they'll be null and void, and these penalties most likely. And again, I don't pretend to have a crystal ball. I'm basing it on my legal experience, my training, and I will tell you that I believe that this bill will have no effect and creates false security in everybody who votes for an Article 5 convention. I continue to oppose the amendment, oppose the bill, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion before I recognize the Senator from Morgan to close? Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just say, in summing it up, I don't agree with my good friend from Harrison County that this thing would be automatically null and void. I do believe that let me concede this at the outset. We are somewhat in uncharted waters because there's never been an Article 5 convention that's been convened under Article 5 of the United States Constitution. However, I think as pointed out by the distinguished senator from Randolph County, the federal elector case, I think, provides a pretty good analogy, and have no reason to believe that the Supreme Court, if ever called upon to answer the question, would not at least be guided in some degree by the precedent set by that case, even though it related to the Electoral College and not an Article 5 convention. But the other point I want to make, Mr. President, is this. This bill is not a call for an Article 5 convention. That's done by concurrent resolution. This bill provides a structure or framework, if one is called, in which West Virginia is a participant. We have already, the state of West Virginia, the House and Senate together, have already adopted a concurrent resolution several years ago calling for an Article 5 convention on the question of a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. As it stands now, there's nothing in our law which endeavors to or seeks to control and limit those persons who would be delegates to such a convention. So the passage of this bill will provide certainly some measure of protection and comfort for what the opponents of an Article 5 convention are afraid of. Some measure more, certainly no less, than exists without the law. I urge passage of the bill.
Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 21 yeas, 11 nays, 2 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 345, expanding alcohol test and lock program to include offenders with drug-related offense. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 345 amends a section of code in Chapter 17C, which is serious driving offenses, and it's a section in Article 5A, which is the administrative procedures involving suspension of people's driver's licenses for driving under the influence of alcohol, controlled substances, or drugs. The purpose of this bill amends a single section, which is Section 3A of that article. It's a very long section, but the whole purpose of the bill is to allow, for the first time, Mr. President, a person who has driven under the influence of drugs, not alcohol, to be a participant in the DUI motor vehicle test and lock program, and it requires the person to submit to drug testing arranged or done by the DMV. So be happy to try to answer questions about this bill. Otherwise, I urge its passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question is before the Senate, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 32 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Senate Bill 381, creating non-resident 3-day fishing license. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 434, requiring training for law enforcement officers responsible for investigating crimes of sexual assault. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 463, consolidated position of Inspector General of Former Workers' Compensation Fraud and Abuse Unit and position of Director of Insurance Fraud Unit. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 501, continuing and indexing of license and stamp fees. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 537, relating generally to kidnapping. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? The chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guest. Remarks by members. Senior Senator from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the body, I just wanted to make an announcement. Many of you all know Dr. Jerry Gilbert. He's been gone for about 10 days. His brother's been very ill. His brother, Jeff, passed away last night. And I would like for us to give a moment of silence in memory of his brother.
Please rise.
Thank you.
Senator from Logan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, I put a little article on your desk this morning. I would entertain me and read it when you get a chance. Closing coal plants is becoming big business and a disaster for customers. Guys, I represent the people of my district. If you read this ain't nothing but money. Banks, money. I don't know if any of y'all have ever heard of ESG, and it stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. So that's what the banks are doing now when an energy company, like a coal company, goes and tries to get a loan, they get dinged because they're related to coal. So you see a lot of these companies now are taking coal out of their name just because the banks won't deal with them. You know, we got to wake up America, wake up West Virginia. It's time to draw the line in the sand, push back. Wall Street don't care about the consumers that we represent. Keep it in mind, Wall Street don't care. I'm asking you to please pay attention. The renewable energies don't work. Look down in Texas. It's real simple. Coal has done a great job for America and a great job for West Virginia. It's been the backbone of this country. I won't give up on it, Mr. President. Thank you.
Further remarks? Miscellaneous business. Senior remarks. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Regarding Senate Resolution 11, I request unanimous consent that the comments made by our senators from Brooke, Cabell, Ohio, and Jefferson be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Further remarks? Miscellaneous business. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Are there announcements? Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet today at 3 o'clock p.m. in the Judiciary Committee Room in the West Wing, and same place tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We'll have a Friday morning meeting. We'll start Friday, and if we finish before the floor session, that may be it. But 2 meetings, Mr. President, 3 today, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you.
Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Education will meet today in 451M. The agenda has been posted at 2 p.m.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance will meet today at 3 p.m. in room 451M.
Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Government Organization will be meeting today at 2 p.m. in room 208 West.
Senior Senator from the 17th. who is not looking at me. Senator from Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Energy will meet today at 1 o'clock in 208 West. The agenda has been posted.
Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Health that was previously scheduled for 1 o'clock today has now been canceled.
Are there further announcements? Okay. If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate adjourned.
The House will please be in order. All those persons not having privilege of the floor will please vacate the chamber at this time, and members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by the lady from the 41st, Delegate Tully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. All of those that feel inclined, please bow your heads in prayer. Maker of heavens and earth, how very blessed are we to have a relationship with you. You know the very numbers of hairs on our head, whether they be few or many. You know us not only by our deeds and actions, but you also know us by our intentions and our hearts. I ask that you bless this body, our beautiful state of West Virginia, and our wonderful nation. Bless our leadership, give them discernment and wisdom to guide us forward according to your will. Let us not lose heart in doing what is good, for in due time we know that we will reap the benefits if we do not grow weary. When challenges arise, let us proceed with resolute determination. And when things do not go quite as expected, let us give the grace and have the grace to remain calm, trusting, and not give in to our frustrations. Bless those that are struggling with loss or illness or the loss of a loved one. Touch each and every heart and hold their hands, dear Lord. In all these things we pray. Amen.
Amen. If all members and guests will please remain standing, we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the gentleman in the 36th, Douglas Barrick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like everyone to face the flag, place your right hands over your heart, and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All members and guests may be seated. Reading the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021.
Gentleman the 47th, Douglas Phillips.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the Journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
The gentleman the 47th asks unanimous consent that further reading of the Journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? The chair hears no objections. Lady from the 49th for a calendar update.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On third reading special calendar, committee substitute for House Bill 2363 has been transferred to the House calendar. First reading special calendar committee substitute for Senate Bill 216 has also been transferred to the House calendar.
Introduction of guests, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our doctor of the day is Dr. Tom Linger from Charleston, West Virginia. If everyone would please make him welcome.
Report to standing committees.
Your Committee on Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse has originated House Bill 2918 relating to Family Drug Treatment Court. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass.
The report to be received. The bill to be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Originating in the Committee on Education is House Bill 2906 relating to the School Building Authority's allocation of money. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Political Subdivisions has had under consideration House Bill 2592 require counties and municipalities to hold all local elections during statewide elections. It's reported with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Judiciary.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services has had under consideration House Bill 2722 prohibiting the use of Class B firefighting foam for testing purposes if the foam contains a certain class of fluorinated organic chemicals, reported with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Banking
No, Clerk may finish. Chair apologizes.
It's reported with amendment with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The report will be received. That bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Banking and Insurance has had under consideration House Bill 2758, requiring the Insurance Commissioner to regulate professional bondsmen, reported with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement has had under consideration House Bill 2862, relating to the Deputy Sheriff Retirement System Act, reports the same back with amendment with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement has had under consideration House Bill 2854, relating to the West Virginia Municipal Police Officers and Firefighters Retirement System, and House Bill 2855, relating to the Natural Resources Police Officers Retirement System, reports the same back with recommendation that each do pass, that they be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The report will be received and each bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources has had under consideration House Bill 2633, creating the 2021 Farm Bill. It's reported with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, and that it be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration Senate Bill 459, relating to return of members' paid contributions to heirs after members' death under certain circumstances, reported with recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that Senate Bill 459 be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time.
The lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that Senate Bill 459 be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time. Are there objections? The chair hears no objections. The clerk will read the bill a first time.
Senate Bill 459, relating to return of members' paid contributions to heirs after members' death under certain circumstances.
The bill will be advanced. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I move the constitutional rule requiring a bill to be read on three separate days be dispensed with, and that the bill be read a second and third time and put upon its passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that Senate Bill 459 be read a second and third time and be put upon its passage. Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 98 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 members absent or not voting. 2/3 of members elected having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will read the bill a second time.
Senate Bill 459. Senate Bill 459.
Clerk's right. The bill didn't pass yet, but we've suspended the rule.
Senate Bill 459, relating to return of members' paid contributions to heirs after members' death under certain circumstances.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Clerk will read the bill a third time.
Senate Bill 459, relating to return of members' paid contributions to heirs after members' death under certain circumstances.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If there are no objections, lady from the 3rd, Douglas Storch, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 459 would amend the provisions of the West Virginia Code providing for municipal policemen's and firemen's pension and relief funds. The bill provides for the refund of a deceased member's contributions if there are no survivors of the deceased member eligible for benefits. Any amount refunded would be reduced by the amount of any benefits already paid. The refund would be returned to a named beneficiary, but if there is no beneficiary named, the refund would be returned to the member's heirs to be distributed in the same manner as current law provides in the interstate succession. Current provisions of the code do not provide a mechanism by which any excess contributions may be refunded when there are no survivors eligible for survivor benefits. Any excess would remain with the pension and relief fund. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to passage of the bill? If not, yes, the gentleman in the second, Douglas Desario, is recognized.
Yes, I would stand today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would stand today and ask your support for this bill. This is a local fireman that lived in the city where I lived. He lost his wife several years ago. 17-year-old son is now left 3 months away from high school. So it's a terrible situation. They're not asking for anything more than what this man has put into his pension. I think it's only fair for his family after he was served as his entire adult life as a fireman protecting our community. So I would ask for your support. Thank you.
Are there any other members who wish to speak to the bill? If not, does the lady wish to close debate on the bill? The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 99 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 member absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 459, relating to return of members' paid contributions to heirs after members' death under certain circumstances.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I move the bill take effect from passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the bill being made effective from passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 99 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 member absent or not voting. 2/3 of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next committee report.
Your Committee on Small Business, Entrepreneurship, and Economic Development has had under consideration House Bill 2760 relating to economic development incentive tax credits. Reports back to committee substitute. Therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
The report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance. Are there further reports of standing committees? If not, reports of select committees. Message from the executive, message from the Senate.
The clerk of the Senate announced that the Senate requests the House to concur in the Senate title amendment on committee substitute for Senate Bill 11, declaring work stoppage or strike by public employees to be unlawful.
The message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate message today on Senate Bill 11 is a title amendment. The purpose of the bill was to declare work stoppage by public employees to be unlawful. The Senate amended the title because of unneeded language where we excluded the extracurricular activities. So I move we concur with the Senate title amendment.
The question before the House is the motion that the House concur in the Senate title amendment to Senate Bill 11. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Chairs advise that is not a roll call vote. Those in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. Question now before the House is the passage of the bill with the amended title as just concurred in by the House. Is there discussion on the motion that the House concur, or that the House passage of the bill as amended by the Senate and concurred in by the House? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 55 ayes, 44 nays, and 1 member absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Is there further title amendment?
The committee substitute for Senate Bill 11, declaring work stoppage or strike by public employees to be unlawful.
Are there further title amendments? If not, the title as amended by the Senate and concurred in by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 102, allowing disabled veterans and Purple Heart recipients park free at paid parking of state or its political subdivisions.
The message will be received. That bill will be referred to the Committee on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security, then the Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 356, allowing for a written part of a driver's exam given in high school driver's education course.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Education.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 387 relating to drug screening of applicants for cash assistance.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources. Are there further messages from the Senate? If not, resolutions.
House Concurrent Resolution 23 declaring March 4th, 2021 to be Sexual Assault Awareness Day in West Virginia.
Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the committee reference be dispensed with and that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration and put upon its adoption.
The lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that the committee reference for HCR 23 be dispensed with and that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration and put upon its adoption. Are there objections? There are no objections. The clerk will please report the resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 23 declaring March 4th, 2021 to be Sexual Assault Awareness Day in West Virginia.
Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to explain the resolution in lieu of having it read.
Are there objections? There are no objections. Lady may proceed.
This resolution declares that today, March 4th, to be Sexual Assault Awareness Day in West Virginia.
The question before the House is the adoption of the resolution. Are there members who wish to speak to the resolution? If not, those in favor of adoption will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the resolution adopted. Are there further resolutions?
House Joint Resolution 25, lower the age to run for a state senator to 21.
The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary. Are there further resolutions? If not, petitions, motions, bills introduced.
House Bill 2907, prohibiting political subdivisions from enacting certain ordinances, regulations, local policies, local resolutions, or other legal requirements.
Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system.
The lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the delegate console system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2013 relating to the Hope Scholarship Program.
To the members, this bill was advanced to third reading with the right to amend. Are there amendments?
The Committee on Finance moves to amend the bill. This is HFIN AM 3-2.
Are there amendments to the amendment?
Delegate Ellington moves to amend the amendment. This is HFA Ellington 3-3, number 1.
The question before the House is the secondary amendment. Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The chair recognizes the gentleman the 27th, Delegate Ellington, to explain the secondary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment has two parts to it. The first part just adds calendar days at the end of 45. That way there's consistency and uniformity as far as when that starts. It was just something that was left out in the committee and felt that it would clarify the days. The second part, though, affects the amount of the Hope Scholarship Fund that would be made available in each school year. The original bill had the limit of $4,600 based on what the average school aid formula paid for each student at that time. The amendment brought that down to only $3,000. A number of members asked that that be raised back up. There are a number of reasons to do that. First, there is the 5% fee that comes out of that amount that goes to the Treasurer's Office to administer funds. The second part would be that if you have a hard number, that's hard to change later unless you do legislation. So if expenses increase over the next several years into perpetuity, we'd have to keep coming back to raise that. The school aid formula already takes into account how much we want to budget per student. So that's flexible each year. The next part would be that some people felt that we should, the services that were available to these students, not everyone's going to utilize that total money. We expect that the budget may not increase tremendously, but we're talking about 1% of students may adhere to this, go into this program. We're talking about maybe 2,500 students or so based on what other states have done. With that, many of them may just do homeschool, which means it may not cost very much for them to do those programs, maybe $1,000 out of the year. Any remaining funds would stay within the fund, and that would affect the next year's amount that comes in. Students that might want to go into a private or parochial school, the fund they may have tuition that may cost $3,000. Some that are less than that wouldn't be a big problem. However, if they have other services that they need in addition to that, such as going back into the public school to take a course, an extracurricular thing, where there's an extra expense, they wouldn't be able to take advantage of that if they already used up all that funds. Ones that might have, there may be a school in their community that the tuition's $3,500. This cuts down on their flexibility to be able to use that. The key was not to restrict too much what they can do and try to make it harder for these children to enter into these programs. Some people look at it as, well, $4,600 was a high ceiling. The ceiling would be around $12,600, which is the total aid to a student on the average, depending on which numbers you look at, about $12,600 per student each year. That would be the ceiling. A number of people would say, well, everything should follow the kid. If that's what's appropriate for that pupil, they should take all of that. Some people would say nothing should go to them. Well, we looked at the state portion was about $4,600. The federal and local share made up the other $8,000. So we felt that for the flexibility of the program, to get more kids into it, to maximize their return on this, the $4,600 was appropriate. So I would urge adoption of the amendment to go back to the original level that we already passed that bill before. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is on the secondary amendment. The gentleman from the 34th, Douglas Boggs, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With all due respect to my friend, the Education Chair, I have to oppose this amendment. I think the $3,000 for a new program that's starting up, it was pretty clear when that amendment passed that it was, I think it was better received than the higher amount. And I think there's always the ability to go back and do something else later if this body or a future body would so desire. But I think for right now, that $3,000 certainly is much more fiscally responsible, and I would respectfully oppose the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman from the 64th, Douglas Householder, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I do concur with the gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Ellington. I do rise in support of the gentleman's amendment. The amount recommended is the state's portion of the funds for educating a child, and I do believe that those funds should follow the child. So I support and I urge adoption.
The gentleman of 36, Douglas Rowe, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from Mercer help us with some questions?
Yes, sir.
Now, as I understand it, what you're proposing is that we provide, say this year, about $4,600 as the state portion of the state aid formula.
The original bill said it would be what the average is for the enrollment over that time, based on the appropriations that goes in the state aid formula, and that's just the state portion.
Yes, sir. Now, the fiscal notes that we had, I think we had two this time, which was really helpful, indicated that this would cost about $30 million, which would be $30 million to come out of the public school system and go to these to the scholarship program, right?
The $30 million, it depends on how many people go into the program.
They estimated, I think, that 2% would go in. Based on 2%, it was $30 million that would come out of the public schools and be used for the scholarship.
I believe the 2% based on the 252,000 students would put about $24 million into the program if all of those students, which was about 5,100 students, if they all did the Hope Scholarship.
That was an initial number that we saw, but I think our fiscal note that we had from the legislative auditor was actually $30 million.
Well, there was another fiscal note that came back and said if everyone was in it, it would be $100 million. Like I said, we're only expecting 1% of the students to do that based on what's happened in other states. So that would probably put you around 13 million.
Well, I wanted to go there. We have in the House amendment a trigger for 2 years into the program, figuring out what the participation rate is, and if it's one student greater than 5%, then the program would not include the students who are already out of the school system. It would only include students who leave the school system. But the number on that, because that is not a shift of funds, that's actually new appropriation, and I think the new appropriation was $103 or $105 million.
Well, I believe that number was based on, if all the students came back in. And recall, if, all the students that are already out there that are not in the school system, that roughly 22,000 students between home and private parochial, if they came back into the school system now, we would still have to fund that in the school aid formula in the future anyway.
Well, we really wonder if they're going to come back into the school system because of the requirements.
We don't expect they will.
But as you said, $103 million, but whenever we applied the $3,000 cap, it brought that cost down to something like $60 million. It took about a third of the cost off, correct?
I think that's if you have all of those people come back into the system.
Well, but it's a third of $4,600 at $3,000 is about 1/3 off of $4,600.
Off of what you have.
Whether it's 2 students or thousands, it would be a third off of whatever it would be. Correct?
Correct.
Now, so we would need an appropriation of $100 and some million in 2026 in order to fund what likely would be full participation by all students, because they're already out of the school system, and that would be 22,000 people, correct?
If they all come
Based
back,
on today's
but most of those are going to start graduating. I mean, that 22,000 is probably someone going to graduate in the next several years.
Well, but you've got kids being born that'll
right,
go into the system.
They're already the ones coming in that are in kindergarten are already eligible.
Yeah, and if we get a boost from a tax decrease or something, maybe there'd be even more students.
Right.
But the point is that the cost of the program is very much greater if we use the $4,600 figure versus the $3,000.
Well, sure, and it would be great if we used 1,000 too. I mean that makes sense.
And as I understand it, the participation is interesting. Folks have to be in the school system in the first 4 years, in the school system, and leave the school system on an application to get the scholarship. Those are the people who would be counted and participate as participants in the program and so on. But magically, 4 years after the program starts, if participation on that basis has been less than 5%, then we include automatically all of the private schoolers, all of the homeschoolers in the program, and checks will be written to those folks. And that's how we get the number of 22. Right now, it would be 22,000 students. And that's what raises the cost of the program so much by, what, $100 and some million.
$103 million is what was calculated.
Yeah. And I think that if we include the 22,000 students plus the ones who have come out, we will have so many students in this program that we will almost be 50% of all students nationwide in ESA programs, correct?
I don't know if I would agree with that, but...
And the states who have this program, most of them have set it up to help disabled students. And in our bill, we have no help, special help to disabled students, correct?
No, that's not correct. Special students can partake in this at the same level.
Right, no special. I mean, whether they're disabled or not won't matter in terms of how much money they would get. They would get the $4,600.
Right. Every child, if they meet the eligibility requirements, are eligible for the HOPE scholarship.
Right. But in other states, they have used most of these funds to be for disabled students, to help them. And we had a bill last year that did that, I think.
Well, other states primarily set those programs up for special students. They've also appropriated a lot more than what we're appropriating.
Do you know the numbers in these other states? I think there are 6.
I had 5. I think Florida had 4%, Arizona 3%, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Tennessee had less than 1%.
Okay, and again, most of those programs had special provisions for disabled students, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, sir, very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Speaker, may I briefly address
The gentleman is recognized.
The amendment? Getting this program started, it's just it's too generous. It's much more money than is paid in these other states. Much, much more money. And it's a tremendous amount of money that's coming out of the school system. And, I think that the way it's set up, if the participation is less than 5%, then we include every single student who's out of the state public school system. It's a huge cost, $103 to $110 million. And that's new money. That's not shifting out of the school aid formula. That's money that we've got to find and appropriate, making it one of the most expensive education programs that we've ever engaged in. Please think about the cost of this program. The amendment raises by a full third the cost overall, some $40 million. If you vote down the amendment, then we can start and we can see how it goes. We can always raise it, but please understand, the folks who see a dollar amount to start with will see this as an entitlement to this funding in 4 years, and there won't be any interest in those 22,000 students in not getting the full amount that we first vote. If it's $3,000, then we can certainly live with it a lot better, and we can always raise it. You can't lower it once you start it. We'll see private schools establish new programs, probably build new facilities in anticipation that they're going to get many, many students into their private schools. And so there's a sense of entitlement that's coming. And I just warn the members that we should not adopt this amendment, but should leave the cap in the bill as it was done by House Finance at $3,000. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 66, Douglas Espinosa, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield?
Yes, sir.
Something that our colleague from the 36 just said that strikes me as not matching some of the information that I saw along the way. I believe there was a suggestion that this $4,600 per student Hope Scholarship would exceed what is offered in some of the other states. Are you familiar with what some of the other states offer? Because my recollection, they're substantially higher than this one.
Yes, sir, I do have that, and I also mentioned to the gentleman that other states gave more into those programs than what we're doing. But I could give you some numbers if you would like.
I would. Thank you.
Arizona median ESA award was $65.99. Florida average account value $10,515 per student. Mississippi average $5,606. North Carolina $8,929. Tennessee average $7,068 per pupil.
Thank you. What does the national average work out to be? Have you seen any figures along those lines?
Average was $10,349.
So the national average for these types of programs in excess of 10,000.
Yeah,
this proposed amendment would offer 4,600.
Correct.
Substantially lower than the national average.
Correct.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
The gentleman from the 46, David Burkhammer, is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to clarify what we're doing here. There's been a lot of talk. We've kind of got off in the weeds here a little bit. We're doing two things with this amendment. Number one is what we said we were going to do. We took it back and fixed a technicality, and we put the 45 calendar days. But the second part of this amendment is actually restoring it to what we already voted on. This is what we already voted on, we already agreed to. And so don't get distracted by everything that's going on here. And remember, we already voted on this, and I urge its adoption. Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the secondary amendment? Does the gentleman wish to close debate on the secondary amendment? The gentleman is recognized.
Yes, sir. I'd like to make one extra point. You know, a couple years ago, we were entertaining college savings accounts, and it didn't go much much further than that. This is back on House Bill 2006. But we did entertain charter schools at that time. And however, when we did put those in, 3 charter schools, we made the restrictions so much that they would not be successful to even start. And we had to come back this past week and pass a new charter bill. So if we try to restrict this type of program, we might do the same thing. It might cause this not to work. The intent is to try to do the best thing for those students, for their education, and not try to restrict it too much. So I would urge adoption of this amendment.
The question, for what purpose does the gentleman at 36 seek recognition?
It's for a roll call, Mr. Speaker.
Understood. A roll call vote has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question before the House now is the secondary amendment as explained by the gentleman at 27th, Doug Ellington. Those in favor of the secondary amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 56 ayes, 43 nays, and 1 member absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that secondary amendment adopted. Are there further secondary amendments?
Delegate Zukoff and Boggs move to amend the bill. This is HFA Zukoff and Boggs 3-4.
Does the lady from the 4th wish to explain the amendment? Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? The chair hears no objection. The lady from the 4th, Doug Zukoff, to explain the secondary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very simple amendment. We don't know how the passage of the Hope Scholarship will impact our county boards of education funding. As the chairman from education just said, he estimates it'll be around 1%. We don't know where in the state these folks might be interested in the Hope Scholarship. So this bill, the intent of this amendment is to help make whole any county school system that has a net loss of more than 2% of their school funding as a result of losing funding through the Hope Scholarship program. We think this bill is important because we don't know what the numbers will be. We also know during the State of the State address, the governor proposed a 3-year flat budget. This could really harm, if we have one county specifically or more than one that lose more than 2% of their school funding, this could harm the kids that are already in the public school system. And I know no one wants to do that. So that's the amendment.
The question before the House is the secondary amendment as just explained by the lady from the 4th. The gentleman from the 64th, Doug Householder, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, to me it makes no sense to fund the public schools for students that are no longer in the school system. And basically that's what I want to caution everyone here today, what this amendment that the gentlelady is proposing. So every time someone leaves the public school system and goes for the Hope Scholarship, this amendment is funding that student like that student never even left. So for those reasons, I urge rejection.
The gentleman at 27th, Doug Ellington, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would concur with the gentleman from Finance. If the student is no longer enrolled in the county public school system, that county does not need money for that student. But the county still will retain the federal and local funding, which is, as I mentioned previously, was about $8,000 per student. They'll still retain that for not even having the student there. So I see no reason that we should fund them back and then not be able to fund the program itself. So that 2% was going to the program, does not need to go back to the school. So I would urge rejection of the amendment.
The gentleman, the 16th, Doug Hornbuckle, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would applaud the gentlelady's efforts on this amendment. I think this is the best of both worlds. With this amendment, you put this in the bill, it's going to ensure that our public education schools do not further deteriorate. Of course, that student would leave the school, but we've got to worry about all the other children that are still remaining in the classroom, and that overhead is not going to change. So for those reasons alone, I think that the lady had a great amendment, and I urge adoption.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the amendment, the secondary amendment? If not, does the lady from the 4th wish to close debate on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an experiment, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know how this is going to turn out. We know that while the monies would be gone from the Hope Scholarship and those kids would no longer be there, we have fixed costs established in our counties for the school buildings themselves, utilities, the workers. We don't know how the teachers would be impacted by how many kids are in the school or how many students are in their classroom. So it may just be that, just a few things are impacted, but it could be that, a school system really needs those funds. And we need to remember as well that we have some school districts that we just took care of last year that really were in a bad situation financially, and we don't want that to happen again. So for those reasons, I would ask for your support for this amendment, and I would ask for the yeas and nays.
A roll call vote on the secondary amendment has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question before the House is, shall the secondary amendment be adopted? Those in favor of the secondary amendment will vote aye. Those opposed to the secondary amendment will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 29 ayes, 70 nays, 1 member absent or not voting, less than a majority. For what purpose does the gentleman from the 27th seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, point of inquiry, if you would, please. The amendment that we have just passed, offered by the delegate from the 27th, in the system does not appear to match the description of the amendment here on the floor with regard to the dollar amounts. The amendment in the system specifically says $3,000, and I think we were discussing $4,600. I wanted to be certain that we are in fact passing or voting on what we had intended to vote.
Well, Chair will deal with that in a second. The question just before the House, the question just decided by the House was on HFA Zukov and Boggs 3-4. There were less than a majority in favor of that particular amendment. That amendment was lost. Clerk will now, or Chair will ask the clerk to respond to the or to advise the Chair, is the amendment in the system correct?
Where's the one that we just...
Will the gentleman from 27 please approach the podium?
Yeah. This matches. Well, you struck out the word. Yeah, you struck. Yeah, you struck.
Put that number in. It just says whatever they are. Chair will respond to the point of order raised by the gentleman from 27, Doug Gearhart. The Chair is advised by both the sponsor of the amendment and the clerk that number, the number that was discussed during debate, was never actually in the bill, but that the number 3,000 that was inserted into the bill in the primary amendment is now what was stricken from the bill, and in its place was inserted the yearly average number contained in the amendment. That the number that was discussed during the debate of 4,600 was in fact that average, but that is not a static number. Did I get it right? Okay. Are there further secondary amendments?
Delegates Hornbuckle and Boggs move to amend the bill. This is HFA Hornbuckle and Boggs 3-4.
The question is on the secondary amendment. Do the sponsors wish to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read? Are there objections? There are no objections. The gentleman, the 34th, Doug Boggs, to explain the secondary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't prepared to explain this one, but I will give it my best shot. This basically just states that to be eligible, the household adjusted gross income for the recipient does not exceed $75,000 for persons filing a single return and $150,000 for persons filing a joint return. I think that it goes to the heart of what a lot of people are concerned about, is making sure that this is not something that's done for only the people that can afford a lot of private schooling and different things, but yet this would get it down to where middle-income folks could be able to take advantage of the program if they so desired. I would defer to any further comments that the gentleman from Cabell might have, but that's my explanation. Thank you.
The question now before the House is the secondary amendment just explained by the gentleman from the 34th, Douglas Boggs. The gentleman from the 64th, Douglas Householder, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the Hoop Scholarship Bill is to provide equality in education funding, and I believe the amendment that's proper before us sort of discriminates, and once again it punishes the child because of some income that a parent makes. For those reasons, I urge rejection.
The gentleman from the 28th, Douglas Pack, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chair of Finance yield. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so I understood you right, that this amendment, if accepted, would discriminate against higher income earners in the state?
I believe so, yes. And punishes those children because of an income level that a parent has made.
Does this bill discriminate against current private school students?
I do not believe so, no.
So current private school students are eligible?
Absolutely. If the Berkhammer amendment, if it's less than 5%, then it's unlimited.
Next year?
Starting in 2024, I'm sorry.
Thank you,
We'll
Mr.
look at
Chairman.
it, but actually it applies on July 1 of 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
The gentleman from the 27th, Douglas Ellington, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would urge rejection of this amendment. We had a similar amendment back when we ran this bill previously. The other part was it was mentioned, I mean, we're trying not to discriminate on any basis. Here we are doing an economic or wealth type of status as far as how you discriminate. But the main emphasis that was made by one of the other gentlemen was, let's say you're a mother that has 4 or 5 kids, and you're just at that $75,000 limit. And you wanted to put each of your kids into this type of program. Well, you just were disqualified. So this was rejected before. I would suggest that we reject it again.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the secondary amendment before the chair recognizes the sponsor to close debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From the 16th to close debate on the amendment.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from the 34th on explaining this amendment. In this amendment, it's going to make sure that we're concentrating the intent of the bill on the people who truly do not have choice, the people who cannot afford to send their kids to private school. This bill is also in the spirit of bipartisanship. So I respectfully disagree with the gentleman from the 27th. It was a different amendment that was put forth before. It was at 50,000 single, 100,000 for a couple. I made a mistake and I was in error. And I wanted to listen to my colleague from the 18th who gave that description of what about the mother who had 4 kids and was just at 51,000 and wasn't able to do this. This is not a good amendment. So I agreed with my colleague from the 18th. And that's why I'm coming before you today to up it to 75,000 and an adjusted gross income, allowing for those deductions for a family that does have a lot of kids, being able to itemize things. So again, this is a different amendment going to 75,000 and 150,000 to make sure that we are protecting and affording opportunity to our most vulnerable West Virginians. I urge adoption. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the secondary amendment just explained by the gentleman from the 34th and 16th. Those in favor, a roll call vote was demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question is, shall the secondary amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 24 ayes, 75 nays, 1 member absent or not voting, less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Delegates Boggs and Rowe move to amend the bill. This is HFA Boggs and Rowe 3-4, number 1.
Are there objections having the secondary amendment explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman from the 34th, Douglas Boggs, to explain the secondary amendment.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. Very simple amendment, new program, new board. All this basically does was require that annually audit 5% of the Hope Scholarship accounts to assure that the funds are appropriately used as provided. And I think that, and it talks about, and it goes on, the board may require receipts for payment with scholarship funds for categories of expenses as provided by rule. This is just there's been some other states, I believe Arizona, if I'm not mistaken, has identified some fraudulent claims in their program. This is just a way to watch a new program, make sure that everything's being done as it's intended. I would urge adoption of the amendment, and I would ask for the ayes and nays.
The question now is on the secondary amendment just explained by the gentleman of the 34th. Are the members who wish to speak to that secondary amendment? The gentleman of the 64th, Douglas Householder, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, to my good friend, Chapter 18, Article 31, Section 10 of the bill. This is auditing of the Hope Scholarship Program. It says the board may propose legislative rules for legislative approval pursuant of this code for the auditing of individual Hope Scholarship accounts and shall conduct or contract for the random auditing of individual Hope Scholarship accounts. So for those reasons, ladies and gentlemen, I urge rejection.
The gentleman of the 27th, Douglas Ellington, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would also concur with the Finance Chair. There are already the ability to randomly audit these accounts for any suspicion of fraud or abuse. We should allow the flexibility to the auditor as necessary. It could be more than 5%, less than 5%. It's whatever they choose. And this can also, any adjustment could be taken care of in the rules that they generate. So for that reason, I don't think this is necessary and would recommend rejection.
Do other members wish to be recognized before the chair recognizes the sponsor of the amendment? If not, does either sponsor wish to close debate on the amendment? The gentleman of the 34th, Douglas Boggs.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I would just ask that the bill does address legislative rule. This is just another way to make certain in the bill that we're giving every possible effort put forth to make sure that everything is done according with the rules that the board sets up. I don't feel real comfortable with the way that the board is set up, but this is a way that at least they would document this, and it would be much more, I think, more transparent, and I would urge adoption.
The gentleman from the 34th, Douglas Boggs, has demanded a roll call vote on the secondary amendment. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Question before the House now is, shall the secondary amendment be adopted? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 24 ayes, 74 nays, 2 members absent or not voting, less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares the secondary amendment lost. Are there further secondary amendments?
Doggett Rowe moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Rowe 3-4.
Does the gentleman wish to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read? Are there objections? There are no objections. The gentleman 36, Doggett Rowe, to explain the secondary amendment.
This is a very simple amendment. It doesn't change any of the policy in the bill. It just says very simply that the parents or the guardians will have to report any funds that they have had and spent for the student's education. It says that now if the board pays directly to a private school or specific to a provider, then that wouldn't have to be listed. But please understand that you're going to have 5,000, the estimate is 5,000 families leave the public school system and be responsible for $4,600. Now, this is just a simple thing to make it clear that when you're giving money to the general population of parents, that the parents ought to be able to report their use of the money. Now, it's possible, and there's nothing in this amendment that would prevent them from giving cards to the parents so that they have an electronic means of registering where they're spending the money. But this just makes it clear that if there isn't some other form of verification, the parents need to list on a form provided by the board the funds that they've used and what the purpose was. I urge adoption and ask for the ayes and nays.
The question before the House is the secondary amendment just explained by the gentleman at 36. Are there members who wish to speak to the secondary amendment? The gentleman at 27, Delegate Ellington, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill puts in on page 20, section 7, that any qualifying expenses on line 31, paid on section D, it says, nothing prohibits parents from making payments for costs that are not covered by the qualifying expenses. So anything in addition to what the account will give as far as the amount, those parents can pay for. They do not get reimbursed for that. There's nothing in there, but they could, if the tuition was $10,000 and all they got in the account was $4,600, they could put the $4,600 to it. They could put the other $5,400 themselves. And there's no reason they should have to list back to the state that they paid that other $5,400. And for any other expenses that they pay, that's their own business, nothing that we should have to audit that. So I would urge rejection of this amendment.
Are there other members who wish to be recognized on the secondary amendment before the chair recognizes the sponsor to close debate? The gentleman at 36 wishes to close debate on the secondary amendment.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I don't know that the gentleman's comments are really addressed to this amendment. The point is that if we give money and put in the pockets of the parents to spend money for the education of their students, they ought to spend it on the education of their children and the students. And all this says is that that if there's not a direct payment, say to a primary school, private school, I mean, or to a tutor for a homeschooler, if that's not a direct payment to that provider, and instead is a payment at the Walmart for school supplies and different things, or maybe a computer or whatever it might be that would help the student, they need to list that. And we can't presume that every single person, when you've got 5,000 people who are receiving money from the state and a fair amount of money, $4,600, that they're going to all act properly. The Center for Budget Policy gave us a number of $700,000 in fraud in the Arizona system. So, this is just a practicality. It's something that the board should be required to require, and that way it'll make the auditing function much easier. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge the members to adopt the amendment.
The gentleman at 36 Duggett Road did demand a roll call vote on the amendment. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question before the House is the secondary amendment. Shall the secondary amendment be adopted? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 24 ayes, 75 nays, one member absent or not voting. Less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that secondary amendment lost. Are there other secondary amendments?
Yes, Doyle.
Delegates Doyle, Thompson, Rowe, Walker, and Pushkin move to amend the bill. This is HFA Doyle et al. 3-4.
Does the gentleman 60s have the wish to explain the amendment?
Yes, Mr.
Are there
Speaker,
objections?
if I may.
There are no objections. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is very simple language. The bill, as it is presently constituted, has a general prohibition against discrimination. Now, I think that's not sufficient. I think we need to have, in each case, a specific prohibition on discriminating on the basis of race, sex, sexual orientation, religion, or disability. And the reason I think so is this. I know very few people who believe that they are racist or biased or bigoted or anything. I don't discriminate, but often they do without realizing it. If we put in specific prohibitions, this calls their attention. Oh, I'd be breaking the law if I discriminate on the basis of X. This is why I think this is necessary. And I think it will seriously improve the bill. And, Mr. Speaker, I urge everybody in the chamber to vote for this amendment. Thank you.
The question before the House is the secondary amendment just explained by the gentleman, the 67th, Douglas Doyle. Are there members who wish to speak to the secondary amendment? The gentleman, the 27th, Douglas Ellington, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am going to urge rejection of this amendment for the same reasons that I did back on the previous time we went over this bill. All that was changed on this was that it put in the sexual orientation. I went over each of the things about race, sex, religion, and disability, that those are already covered in state and federal code. By putting in sexual orientation, that increases the protected group as HOPE students. That does not protect other students. My opinion is that this venue should be really for this bill and not to change the West Virginia Human Rights Act. That's where this change should be made if they're going to do that. If we set precedent here, then it affects other things. In addition, at the end of that same section that this would go in, it also states that this article does not expand the regulatory authority of the state, its officers, or other school district to impose any additional regulation of education service providers beyond those necessary to enforce the requirements of the program. Now, if one of these education service providers does not feel comfortable with signing up on this, they don't have to. So if they feel that it's going to change the way they do their stuff, then they don't have to be in this program. So I would reject this based on what I just said, and not to start a change in code that just because it's in a different bill, because that'll set the stage for everything else. I'm not advocating anyone discriminate against anything. As I mentioned in the previous discussion, we're trying to be non-discriminatory. So I would just reject this one, and let's bring that up in another matter with the West Virginia Human Rights Act.
Does the gentleman, the 67th, Douglas Doyle, wish to close debate on the secondary? The gentleman, 37th, Douglas Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to briefly remind the body that either yesterday or the day before, I can't remember, all the days kind of blend together, we added a protected class to the broadband bill. So we wouldn't discriminate against people, their service wouldn't be discriminated against because of their political affiliation. Now, all this does, we stated earlier when we were debating the other amendment, we don't want to discriminate against anybody. We don't want to discriminate against rich people. Well, let's put it in writing. We don't want to discriminate against anybody. It's a good amendment. Very easy for me to vote for.
The gentleman, the 67th, the lady, please ring in if you wish to be recognized to speak on the secondary amendment. The lady, 35th, Douglas Young, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry, I just made up my mind. Will the Chair of Education yield for one question?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm looking through the bill, and I'm not terribly familiar. I'm not on education or finance, but is the only section where the bill mentions discrimination talking about 42 U.S. 1981?
Right, that's on page 26, line 10, section 4. Certify that it will not discriminate on any basis prohibited by 42 U.S.C. 1981. We discussed that before.
Okay, and 42 just covers race and ethnicity, right?
Covers mainly race and contracts.
So it doesn't cover religion, so these providers could discriminate based on religion?
No, not based on that part, but everything in the public school system has already under federal and state law. So these would be abide by that too.
Okay, thank you.
Are there further members who wish to be recognized on the secondary amendment? The gentleman, 36th, Douglas Rowe, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very briefly, you know, it seems unfair to say that we ought to fix that in the Human Rights Commission Act when we can't get that bill out of committee and onto the floor. So, you know, we just have to take our best shots whenever we want to prevent discrimination, whether it's based on religion or sexual orientation or whatever it might be. We really don't have a fair shot at that act, and because we're not able to get it out of committee. So I think that it's appropriate to try to assure that program by program is fairly addressed in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, 67th, Douglas Doyle, to close debate on the secondary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The eminent chair of education mentioned that we shouldn't do anything that was unnecessary to combat discrimination. I think these specific prohibitions are necessary. And that's just a philosophical different point of view between the chairman, whom I think does a wonderful job, and me. He did mention that there was a slight change in the bill, or in the amendment, by using the term sexual orientation instead of gender identity. My good friend behind me from the 36 pointed out that this was required by a U.S. Supreme Court decision, the opinion of the court being written by Justice Gorsuch. So we are using Justice Gorsuch language here. I just want everybody to understand that. One more reason I think it's important to be specific when you say don't discriminate. It prevents lawsuits. If we don't adopt this amendment, we're going to have more lawsuits, I believe. With that, Mr. Speaker, I ask for the ayes and nays.
The question before the House is the secondary amendment as explained by the gentleman, the 67th. Roll call vote was demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is, shall the secondary amendment be adopted? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 22 ayes, 76 nays, 2 members absent or not voting, less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares the secondary amendment lost. Are there further secondary amendments? If not, the question before the House is the primary amendment as amended. The question before the House is the primary amendment as amended. Are there members who wish to speak to the primary amendment as amended? If not, those in favor of the primary amendment as amended will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Chair declares the primary amendment as amended adopted. The question now before the House is, the clerk will read the bill a third time.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2013.
The question
relating to the Hope Scholarship Program.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to passage of the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in, yes, the gentleman of the 27th, Delegate Ellington.
Did you want me to present the bill?
If the gentleman wishes to speak to the bill, yes. Gentleman is recognized.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the bill does is, we've done this before. We've gone over it, but there were changes based on the strike and insert, the primary amendment that was amended. As you recall, the bill would create a new Hope Scholarship Program to provide public funding for K-12 student residents of the state that receive educational goods and services from education service providers outside the state's public school system. The providers can be either private schools or educational goods and services to homeschooled students. The program would be administered by the state treasurer and the board. It would be operational no later than July 1st, 22. Funding would also be provided through legislative appropriation. We went over review of the Finance Committee report that showed that number of changes throughout, showing what the definitions of eligible recipients were, that they had to be either a state resident, be enrolled the previous instructional term, or be enrolled for 45 days that we amended into that. Or they could be kindergarten age that would be just starting. We also had that they would have to be in for the 45 days, and that if they did apply, that there would be 45 days that the board would have to respond to their application. It also had a trigger that said that in 2026, that eligibility would be opened up to all students if there was less than 5% of the Hope Scholarship students, and those eligible that applied at that time were under the 5% threshold. It does give it gave different changes as far as the membership board. Didn't mention that at the time, but it went from 7 to 9. It did put in the Attorney General, State Superintendent of Schools, Executive Director of the Herbert Henderson Office of Minority Affairs, the Chancellor of Higher Education, and it reduced the number of parents that the governor would appoint from 4 to 3. It did also remove the representative from organization in the state designation as a protection and advocacy agency. As you know, we went back to the original funding that would be based on what the average student funding for state funding at that time based on enrollment. It does give different language throughout for other minor things. Overall, I think the changes in the previous amendment make the bill a little better. I would urge adoption of it. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
The lady in the fourth, Dr. Zukov, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to belabor the point because I've already given you my thoughts about this bill earlier when we had discussion before we amended it. I do thank you for amending it because one of my questions involved something about, would they be eligible? So we fixed that. And I appreciate and thank the co-chair and chair of education for doing that. I had prepared, although it's not correct, thanks to one of the gentlemen that's my friends on the other side, but I am prepared to show you that there are 12 counties in West Virginia who don't have a public school. I don't have a private school or a religious school affiliated there. So those children aren't going to be able to attend. They're not going to have the opportunities. I think this is a bill for the haves and have-nots. I think it hurts the children of West Virginia whose parents don't have the wherewithal or the resources to get them to a school in case transportation isn't provided. The child who doesn't have enough food to eat in the house and may want to go to public school even though he'd benefit greatly from the other school system, but he can't afford to go because he needs to be fed at school. I also worry. In my county, I've done a lot of research this is the third year we've talked about charters and educational savings accounts, which is basically, this is another way of the scholarship route, going with educational savings accounts. We have some pretty good homeschoolers in my district, and I'm glad that this money will be able to help them. But we also have the majority of homeschoolers in my area who have truancy issues in high school, and they become homeschoolers because their parents don't want to show up in court. So for those reasons, I'm going to be opposing this bill, and I'd like you to think really hard about the kids that are going to be hurt from this. And then by not passing some of the amendments today that we had, we can have kids who can't benefit for a variety of reasons, and we're going to hurt we may hurt, I don't know that we will, that's why I offered the amendment, that we may hurt some of the school districts that already exist in West Virginia. And remember, in a lot of our counties, they are the major employer. So when we talk about economic development, I really worry about hurting the education of the majority of the students in West Virginia schools because of some of the access that they're going to leave. And I think if we really, really, really wanted to reform education in West Virginia, we would do some things much differently, like trying to get children programs in place for children who don't know how to read by the third grade, because we know that those kids basically don't go on to do well in school or in life in some cases. So I'd just like you to think about the kids that we're leaving behind when you vote on this bill, and the kids that we might be discriminating against as a result of that. Their discrimination can happen in many forms. Unfortunately, economically underserved kids or those that are poor and can't afford or don't have the parents' wherewithal to make this happen are going to be lost in this system. So I'm going to be voting against this bill, and I'd urge you to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman with 36, Doug Barrick.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I spoke against this bill last time it came up before the floor, and after a lot of research and a lot of consultation about it and soul searching, I'm still against it, and I think it's a very bad bill. I mentioned my mom, who was a very staunch Republican, and she would always. I'm a product of the public school system, and my mom would always tell me that, that I asked her why people who didn't have kids had to pay for public education, and she said because it's the cornerstone of a good community. When you're moving somewhere, what's the first thing a lot of people ask? How are the schools here? And not just because they have kids, but because the neighborhoods tend to be better. It attracts people that are going to keep property values up, and it just makes for a better community. And so that's one thing that really concerns me, is that when you take away money from the public school system, you end up, and you take kids out of the school system, you end up with a two-tiered education system, and that's not what we need. Because one thing I know this, I did it, and I know you all did it, we all campaigned on bringing in jobs and people into this state, and you're not going to do it with a poor public school system. That's one thing. A lot of businesses are going to look at us and they say, well, your school system is slipping down, you're losing, you're seeing the results in the public sector of it. It's becoming a babysitting service. You're going to see those numbers slipping, and people are going to be very want to, to not come into this area. So that's one thing that really concerns me. And so because of that, I definitely, I've been in areas with good public schools, and they thrive. And it's something that I think we need to keep in mind, and so I urge everyone to vote against this. Thank you very much.
The gentleman, the 19th, Doug Griffith, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to point something out that I think we're overlooking here, and I can say so because I was fortunate enough to have two good parents who help support our local schools. When we do this and we're sending monies out of the public school system, we're also sending parents out of the public school system. Those that volunteer, those that donate, will now be donating and volunteering outside the public school system. And I'm also reminded when I drive around West Virginia, I sometimes come into a rural area where I ask myself, where do these people shop? Where do they work? What do they do? It's so rural. Well, the one thing that the people in that area have is a public school to help bring those children up from that poverty, up from that situation, to be good citizens and also to be successful. And so therefore, I also am reluctant about this. I understand the good intent, but we're going to pull parents out of the public school system as well as money, and we're going to hurt the rural areas and the more needy children. So I urge opposition to this. Thank you.
The gentleman of the 43rd, Doug Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman of education yield for one question or two?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So looking through this bill and qualifying expenses for the Hope scholarship accounts, I was looking at this, and I have a question, because, I'm a teacher, I don't make a whole lot of money. But I was looking at tutoring services provided by an individual or a tutoring facility, provided that such tutoring services are not provided by a member of the Hope Scholarship's immediate family. So let's say I have a good friend, and she has two children. She decides to take advantage of the Hope Promise or Hope Scholarship account. So she's going to get a check now, I believe, for each child of $3,000 now. Is that correct with the amendment, or is it still 46?
It's whatever the average is that the state funds.
So we'll just use even 3,000 as a low ball. So she's going to get a check for 3,000 for each student, and she contracts me to be the tutor. And so we worked out this deal. So she's going to get $6,000, and she says, hey, I'm going to get this. I'll write you a check. You're the tutor. And we split the money. Is that possible?
No.
Under the way this is written? Because it looks like it.
That would be illegal.
Well, it would be illegal, but would it be possible is my question.
Anything is possible. I'll just give you that. But the way this is set up is they have to the board has to authorize the service provider. And then they have a debit card or other way that they have to pay for those expenses. And if they go to Walmart, if that's a vendor that will provide supplies, then that could be deducted for those supplies.
So,
and that comes up, the treasurer will have the record of that.
So would the board then contact me, say, hey, Mr. Thompson, you were tutoring, let's see what you've actually done? Or would they just take my word for it?
If you're going to tutor, you have to sign up with the board. And they don't just give you $6,000. It has to be either like a debit card or some other way that they're going to do that online. You have to sign an agreement to that. The vendor has to sign an agreement too that they would accept that and abide by the rules.
Okay. I'm just seeing some possible avenues for some extra money here. Thank you. Speak to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I'm going to oppose this bill as well. I have many problems with it. Countless studies have been done on ESAs around the country, and those studies have shown that ESAs do not result in higher test scores. They do not result in better academic achievement. And in fact, they seem to have more problems with accountability in that we're giving out public school funds and we don't know where they're going, and we're not getting anything in return. Our schools are already severely underfunded. I urge many of you, or urge you all, to go visit your local schools, see the needs that our schools have, because whether or not 10, 15, 20, 30 students from my school stay or they use this program, we still got to keep the lights on, we still got to pay the water bills, we still got to have staff, and we're removing funding that will be paying for those. Another concern I have with this is I live in Randolph County. We're a large county. We have a lot of schools, a lot of smaller schools, a lot of community schools. I'm sure many of you do. And in those small communities, as my good friend here from Wayne was talking, that's the central focal point of that community. When our small community schools close, the community dies. We have several small schools in my district. I'm very concerned that this bill, using our public funds and taking them out of our public schools, will result in mass consolidation. Now, did any of you guys campaign on closing our schools? Can you go back to your districts and say that you voted for a bill that's directly going to have an impact on the funding that could cause consolidation? Because I didn't. Page 24 talks about discrimination, and we did talk about that a little bit. However, I'm a little concerned that public schools cannot deny any student. If you live in that district, it's your right to be educated, regardless of your race, your religion, or lack thereof, how much money your parents make, if you're wealthy, if you're poor. They cannot deny you. This bill will essentially allow public funding to institutions that will be able to discriminate. Case in point, it's just going to happen. Another problem I have was page 15 of the bill. And it talks about an application for the Hope Scholarship is confidential and is not a public record to release pursuant to the West Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Folks, these are public funds. This is what our taxpayers of our state, our constituents, pay. It's my belief, if we're going to be spending their money, they should know where it's going. So, for all of these reasons, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to seriously consider this, what this impact will have on your local schools, the children, and if you want to shut schools down, that's up to you, but I'm not. I urge rejection. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of the 16th, Dr. Hornbuckle, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will rise today to urge a strong rejection of the Hoax Scholarship. Simply put, there is no general consensus on this bill. Number one, fiscally, the bill was so bad the first time that we passed it out that we had to have it committed to finance. We actually passed a bill on the floor, understood that it was bad fiscal policy, threw it back in finance, then we came out here and did something totally different today with the amendment. Number two, no accountability. The gentleman from the 36th and the 34th tried to put amendments in that were going to speak to auditing and just purely writing down your expenditures. We voted that down, so we don't want any accountability. No discrimination. The gentleman from the 67th put that amendment in. We rejected it. Now, on the face of that, it was said that this bill already covers that. Okay? It also said that we don't need to be duplicative. I could go with that, not being duplicative. However, I find that very hard to believe because just a few days ago, we passed Senate Bill 11, which is already illegal for work stoppages and strikes. So I think we're fine with being duplicative here, okay? Also want to talk about success. Through testimony and finance, we found out that all but one state narrowly confines their program to IEPs and disability. For the success of this program, it's just not viable right now to open it up to everyone. We need to be following successful measures. And thirdly and lastly, again, this is $4,600. Now, this might be not understood by some in here, but I think most. We are pushing this bill to provide choice for everybody in our state. And at $4,600, there's still going to be a sizable gap for most West Virginians to make up to send the kids to those different schools, which means that they won't be able to do it. They just simply won't be able to do it. So, you know, I guess I'm a little bit happy today that we're not the party of handouts anymore. Because we're carving out stuff, and it's not even for poor people. The people that have the ability to go to these different institutions, we're just going to give them a handout. So, if you want to provide handouts, go ahead. Vote for the Hoke Scholarship.
The gentleman to 34th, Douglas Boggs, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try to be very brief on this. Sometimes that's not easy for me, and my wife reminds me of that on a regular basis. But, you know, this last year has been a time where our schools, our kids, they've been under a lot of pressure. I mean, it's been a year, and this pandemic has really taken a toll. So, and I think it's taken a toll on everyone. But I'm very, very concerned about what we're doing in this bill. I think basically, and we alluded to it with the amendment from the lady from the 4th, I think the gentleman from Randolph mentioned it as well. Many of the speakers have talked about basically we're defunding our public school system, and this is the first shot at that effort. And I'll just give you a few concerns that I have that I don't think are going to go over real well. It's my understanding from in committee, and I don't believe anything's changed in this. I don't think there's anything in this bill that would keep this money from being used to send students out of state to private schools. I don't really think the public has understood that, and I don't think they understand that yet today. You know, the public has really not had a lot of access other than just listening, except for when we're in the chamber. So I think that's a concern that I think is going to resonate. I think that the Hope Board, and I'm not making any comments on, I'm sure they're good people and they will be good people, but it has no oversight. It basically oversees itself. And one of the components in that is they can make the determination. There's a list of things that can be used, the scholarship money can be used for, but then I believe the last item mentions that any other things that they might determine would be acceptable. I don't know what those will be. None of us know what that will be. So that's a concern with the lack of oversight on that. The bill also talks about the state superintendent of schools being on the board, and that he may, and I want to stress it does say may, he may provide staff if the board requests it. But the Department of Education said when they were here that it's silent of who pays for that. Does the expense fund pay for that? Does the superintendent's office or the State Board of Education pay for that over and above the I'll use the $4,600 figure, but I realize it is a flexible figure, but it's certainly way higher than the $3,000 that was in the bill earlier. there's a lot of people in my district that struggle with child care. They work, they try to find a place for their kids to go after school, and it's expensive, and people struggle with it. I understand some of the things in here, after school programs, it would be an acceptable expense. I can tell you there would be a lot of people that's in our public school system, the parents that are in our public school system, that would love to be able to have somebody pay for child care. And I understand it doesn't say child care, it says after school program. But what constitutes an after school program? We don't know. Is that just reading somebody a book? That's still open for discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, there are so many unanswered questions about this. We're going over into some territory that I'm not really sure that our citizens, some will like it, many will not. We've really done a lot of things this year that have been, can be perceived, I believe, as a tax on education. But my biggest concern with this bill is down the road, the unintended consequences, and I think a gentleman from Randolph alluded to it earlier. I've got some schools in my district in some sparsely populated areas. It's a long way for a bus ride if those schools have to be closed. And I believe that we're going down a road that may very well, over a period of time, be a factor as we're all hemorrhaging population in our districts, with the exception of just a few select areas. What's going to happen when those areas population continues to accelerate further in a loss of population, because we have a lot of people that have pulled out of the public school system and have exercised other options? I am very concerned that we're going to see some schools close, consolidation. Again, that's not something that I want to be part of, and I'm sure none of you want to be part of it either. And finally, if there's not enough money to operate the schools that are left, there's only one place to go, and that's back to the taxpayers for higher taxes. And that'll affect every constituent in this room, potentially, of the people that we all represent. It could potentially affect everybody in this room. That's reason enough for me to vote no on this bill, and I would certainly urge you to do likewise. Thank you.
The gentleman at 27th, Delegate Ellington, to close debate on the bill.
Yes, sir. Thank you. A few brief comments. First, this bill gives opportunity to some students, to their families, the parents, and the children. Our obligation to all of our citizens is to provide a free and efficient education. We have almost 300,000 students, K-12, that it's our obligation to do so. So if you provide education to students, how do you do it? Well, not necessarily one size fits all. We have our public school system. We have parents that choose to homeschool. We have parents that choose to put them into a private school if they have the ability to do so, or parochial schools. So there's different ways that can be achieved. Now, the issue about taxpayer money going for any of these things. Well, we fund the education. This is one form of giving the students the state appropriation that if they're in a situation where they can't necessarily do something different, they have that ability to try something different. For a student that's in the public school system that just doesn't seem to be working out for them, this gives them a choice to try something else. The goal is not to hurt the public school system. By no means is that any attempt or impression to do that. The goal is to help them improve things, let them do better, want their environment to be better. Why keep a kid in there that may not be doing well and dragging down other things? We want to put that child in the best environment for them to do well. And if it is the public school system, that's great. That's what we want. I think all of us want that. So part of the goal is to try to improve that. But people do keep talking about public money going to other things. I'm just going to give you an example. We're responsible for the health care of our citizens. Do you think public money doesn't go to private institutions or private practitioners in this state? The goal is to provide health care. We do it through federal clinics. We do it through nonprofit hospitals, for-profit hospitals, clinics that have nonprofits. We have providers that are private practice. I'm one of those. I receive state funds for that. I take care of the citizens. So what I'm saying is there's more than one way to educate our students. This is just one small part to take that population of kids out that need a different environment to learn and excel. Isn't that the goal that we're trying to achieve? And by the same token, if they're not in the environment that may be bringing them down, gives the other people in that environment to do better. So I fully support this. I think it's a good start. We're still working on trying to improve the system all throughout. Hopefully we'll get there with the rest of the things we're going to try to do. But I definitely support this, and I would ask for your support too.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 57 ayes, 42 nays, and 1 member absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2013 relating to the Hope Scholarship Program.
Are there amendments to the title?
The Committee on Finance moves to amend the title.
The question before the House is the title amendment. Those in favor of the title amendment will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title of the bill will be the title as amended by the House. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Are there further bills on third reading? No. If not, bills on second reading. Committee
substitute for House Bill 270, providing for collection of tax by hotel marketplace facilitators.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Senate Bill 358, removing prohibition on ATMs located in an area where racetrack video lottery machines are located.
For what purpose does the gentleman of 35th Legislative Capito seek recognition?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd move that we move Senate Bill 358 to third reading with the right to amend. Unanimous consent request.
The gentleman of 35th Legislative Capito asks unanimous consent to advance Senate Bill 358 to third reading with the amendment pending and the right to amend. Are there objections? There are no objections. The bill will be so advanced. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2257 relating to extended supervision for drug offenders.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Garcia moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Garcia 3-4.
Does the gentleman wish to explain his amendment? In lieu of having it read.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from the 50th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this bill regarding additional supervision for certain drug offenders, it provides that a judge may impose this additional period of supervised release up to 10 years after the first sentence is discharged. And that could be either through probation, through parole, or through somebody getting out, being discharged from incarceration. The important thing about this bill is that this is a decision that would be made by a judge at the time of a sentencing. And so, for example, if you have a type of drug offense that would be a 1 to 10 sentence, at the time of the sentencing, the judge would make the sentence and could potentially decide for an additional 10 years of supervised release after the person finished the 1 to 10 sentence. So in many cases with incarceration, you have what's called good time, a day for a day. And so 10 years in this type of scenario would mean that the person would discharge from their incarceration after 5 years. Regardless, there are also possibility of somebody, again, serving probation, discharging from that, somebody serving a period of incarceration less than 5 years, and then discharging. But what happens is that in this period of time, the decision of the judge is, he does not have, when making this determination, a full view of how the rehabilitation system has worked. And really whether this additional period of supervised release is both necessary and in the best interest of public safety and the individual who is trying to rehabilitate his or herself. So what my amendment would do is would say within 60 days of the discharge of the sentence. So at a time when the judge would have the ability to see exactly where this individual is going with his or her life. That's the time when that individual should have a hearing in front of the judge so the judge can look at the circumstances that are involved. Because one of the things that we saw in the Judiciary Committee is this decision, this philosophy, has a major cost. It has a potential for upwards of $500,000 in extra probation costs per year. And it also has the potential to put individuals into further incarceration, whether that be in our regional jails or Division of Corrections. So I believe this is an opportunity to provide a gatekeeping measure to make sure that if we're going to spend money to help keep our public more safe, that it not be a decision that was made potentially 5 or 10 years ago by a judge, that there will be this additional period of supervision, which could turn into incarceration, and rather the judge has all the facts before him of how this person may have improved their life, may have rehabilitated, may have gone to drug treatment, may have a job, and where supervised release above and beyond what that person has encountered may provide a barrier for that person to become a tax-paying citizen. So, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to that, and I urge adoption.
Are there those wishing to speak on the adoption of the amendment? Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Capito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the gentleman's amendment. I think it improves the bill. It brings this supervised release in conformance with other parts of the code that deal with supervised release. I think it improves the bill, and I plan to vote for it and would urge you to do the same.
Are there those wishing to speak? If not, does the gentleman wish to close? The gentleman does not wish to close. Question before us is on adoption of the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Next bill on second reading. What? Oh. Are there further amendments?
Delegate Pushkin moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Pushkin 3-4, number 2.
Gentleman asks unanimous consent to explain the bill in lieu of having it read. Or is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from the 37th, Delegate Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to make sure, we're going to my second amendment, taking up my second amendment first. And first of all, I believe what the real intention of this bill is, since 10 years extra parole, right now in current codes reserved for the most violent offenders and for sex offenders. The bill adds it for nonviolent drug charges. And I believe it was the intent to say, well, this is only for the big dealers. What this amendment does, it removes conspiracy. We made a similar amendment in committee that was adopted that removed the charge of conspiracy from the bill, but we didn't get all the conspiracy out. What this amendment does, it removes all charges of conspiracy. So not just the dealer, but somebody who was associated with the dealer. If this isn't removed, they could also wind up getting an extra 10 years parole, which is usually only reserved for the sex offenders and violent offenders. And so I'd urge adoption of the amendment.
Those wishing to speak on adoption of the gentleman's amendment. Delegate from the 35th, Delegate Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the gentleman's amendment. I believe we addressed this in committee. Consider it somewhat technical because perhaps we left some of the sections out. I think it's a good targeted amendment, and I support it.
Are there those wishing to speak on adoption of the amendment? If not, does the gentleman wish to close? The question before us is on the gentleman's amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments?
Delegate Pushkin moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Pushkin 3-4, number 1.
Gentleman asks unanimous consent to explain the bill in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this amendment does is, like I said, if this bill is, this extra parole is reserved for the big drug dealers, what this does is removes the charge of possession with intent. There is no weight or monetary value attached with possession with intent. We heard during testimony from a gentleman who was convicted with possession of intent for about $25 worth of cocaine. This removes possession with intent from the bill. I don't believe it's the intention of the bill to lock up people who could have small amounts. This make it clear that this is only going to, or not lock, to keep people under supervision for just small amounts. This makes it very clear that the only ones who would be getting this extended supervision are people who had controlled buys of large amounts of contraband. I urge adoption of the amendment.
Those wishing to speak on adoption of the amendment, gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, the third time is not a charm. I do rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment. We've worked very hard collaboratively and in a bipartisan manner to make this a good bill. It's not what everybody on this side wants, and it's not what everybody on this side wants, but we've kind of worked towards the middle. But I will say that the amendment before you now sort of, I think, eviscerates part of the purpose of the bill, which is to for us to keep our eyes on those that are pushing the most dangerous substances into our communities. And that's limited to heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl. My friend from the 37th referenced the notion that there's kind of no sort of minimal requirement for how many or how much drugs you have to have on you. But the reality is, in order to convict somebody with an intent, in this case, you have to prove with other things that individual was in fact intending to distribute. So we're talking about scales, paraphernalia, weight generally comes into that conversation. I would also add, and we'll talk about this perhaps tomorrow when this bill's on third reading, that we've provided the judge here with discretion. This is a may bill, if you will. It's not a shall bill. So we've provided our judges with discretion to make these calls, and with incorporation of the gentleman from the 50th Amendment, we've also decided to readdress that at the time that these folks are about to reenter our communities. So for those reasons, I rise in opposition to the gentleman from the 37th Amendment and urge its rejection.
Gentleman from the 36th, Delegate Rowe.
Thank you. Would the gentleman explain to me, yes, sir, please, as the chair. I see a bunch of statutes referred to, but I don't know what the scope of this bill is. We have, I think, 3 drugs named, but about 6 or 7 statutes that could be statutes that would extend the probation time by 10 years. Can you tell me what, for example, is marijuana included in this?
No.
Let's see, I can't remember what else. Any other, we've got methamphetamine, fentanyl, and heroin. Cocaine?
It would be Schedule 1 and 2 narcotics. I would have to dig up the comprehensive list.
And you say that does not include marijuana?
It does not include marijuana.
Okay. There are a bunch of convictions here, and I just wonder, is it the same drugs in each of the different statutes that are referred to? Because
could you repeat that? I apologize.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what what acts by someone could extend their sentence by 10 years.
Essentially, it's possession. It really boils down to possession with the intent to distribute. The purpose of the bill is to provide extended supervision on those most dangerously active in the drug trade in West Virginia. And I would argue that the discretion that we've provided our judges kind of, I think, does provide some sort of protection. It's not a guarantee, you know that, but you know, we've limited it to the most dangerous drugs. We've tried to limit it to possession with intent. So we've tried to really kind of raise it to a high bar here.
So I understand, possession with intent means that you didn't sell it. You just had enough quantity that you could sell it if you chose.
That the circumstances surrounding the arrest would suggest that there was an intent. That's obviously a mens rea question.
And so if I'm just not comfortable with possession with intent, because there's no requirement that the sale actually be completed, correct?
The gentleman's correct. So as I mentioned, generally in order to convict on a possession with intent, you're going to have other paraphernalia such as scales, individually bagged drugs. I think it's not quite as murky as we think it might be. I mean, there has to be a demonstration that there was an effort to distribute the drug.
But a number of people who are convicted of drug crimes are addicts, correct?
Correct.
And for an addict, what this will do is probably increase their incarceration penalty by 10 years, the possibility of being incarcerated.
I would not say probably.
And if we house one of these folks, I think the fiscal note says that it would cost us $20,000 a year to house these folks who violate their supervised release for a year.
Gentleman may state his point of order.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I'm not sure at this point whether we're speaking to the bill or the amendment. The day is getting long, and these conversations are getting long. I appreciate the fact that we need to know what we're voting upon, but let's keep it in order.
Gentleman, please confine his remarks to the amendment before us. Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you. I just need to, I still don't understand, and so I appreciate your help, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there further wishing to speak on the passage of the amendment? If not, does the gentleman wish to close? The gentleman wish to close. The gentleman from the 37th, Delegate Pushkin. Excuse me 1 second. We do have a light. The gentleman from the 16th, Delegate Hornbuckle.
Excuse me, would the chair please yield?
The gentleman yields.
Oh, thank you. So I just was unclear on the, was cocaine included or not?
We're live. Yeah, there we go. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Those wishing to speak? If not, gentleman from 37.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, in regards to the comment from my friend from Mon County, the day is getting long, conversations are getting long. 10 years extra parole is also long, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about real people's lives that could be impacted by this, so we got to make sure we get it right. And one thing that I disagree with my friend from Kanawha, the chairman, on is that all these other elements that have to be in place to get a conviction for possession with intent. You don't have to have scales. You don't have to have extra containers. It's whether somebody's charged with possession intent is up to the arresting officer. Whether somebody's convicted is up to the judge. And yes, this is a permissive bill. The judge may or the judge may not. What the amendment does is make it so the judge may not give somebody an extra 10 years for $20 worth of cocaine. It could happen if we don't pass this amendment. So I urge adoption of the amendment.
Question before us is on passage of the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. The nays appear to have it. The nays do have it. I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Next bill on second.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2507, remove the limitations on advertising and promotional activities by limited video lottery retailers.
Are there amendments? Bill be advanced.
Committee
Next bill.
substitute for House Bill 2621, mandating certification for certain members of fire departments, require certain types of training, allow specialized personnel who are not firefighters to be members of a department, and require the postings of fire department evaluations.
Are there amendments?
No.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2675, relating to costs and interest in eminent domain condemnation proceedings.
Are there amendments? Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2741, relating to expansion of the alcohol test and lock program to offenders with a drug-related offense.
Are there amendments? Bill be advanced. Further bills on second reading. Bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 280, Senate Bill 280, relating to e-commerce modernization.
Bill be advanced.
Senate Bill 372, providing greater discretion to West Virginia Board of Medicine to approve graduate clinical training.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2221, relating to the establishment of an insurance innovation process.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2335, increasing the minimum criminal penalty for a driver who, in an impaired state, causes the death of a minor.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2382, authorizing the Department of Environmental Protection to promulgate a legislative rule relating to ambient air quality standards.
Gentlelady from the 49th, Delegate Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to recommit the bill to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Without objection, bill be recommitted to the Committee on Judiciary. Next bill on first reading.
House Bill 2701, relating to authorizing the Division of Rehabilitation Services to approve acceptable training programs required for low vision individuals to obtain a Class G driver's license.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2709, providing that the aggregate liability of a surety on a consumer protection bond under the West Virginia FinTech Regulatory Sandbox Program does not exceed the principal sum of the bond.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2764, allow the Division of Financial Institutions to enter into reciprocity agreements with other jurisdictions that operate similar programs to the West Virginia FinTech Sandbox Program.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2765, relating to allowing emergency management and operations vehicles operated by airports to use red flashing warning lights.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2905, relating to repealing the prohibition against the use of certain words.
Bill be advanced. Further bills on first reading. If not, leaves of absence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleague, Delegate Cooper.
Without objection, leave be granted. Introduction of guest. Miscellaneous business. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Friday, March 5th.
Lady from the 49th moves, subject to announcements, the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Friday, March 4th, 2021. Are there announcements?
Yes.
Gentlelady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I move that I announce that your Committee on Rules will meet tomorrow morning at 10:45 in the House Judiciary Committee room.
Gentleman from the 10th, Delegate Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet tomorrow morning, Friday the 5th at 9 a.m. in the House chamber. The agenda will be posted.
Delegate from the 32nd, Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Your Committee on Judiciary will meet tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock a.m., Government Organization Room. The agenda will be posted, and one day late, but I would like everyone to wish our Reverend Dungy a very happy birthday.
Delegate from the Delegate from the 15th, Delegate Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet today, March 4th at 1:45 in the Government Organization Committee Room, 1:45. They're also on tomorrow, March 5th, there will be a public hearing at 3 p.m. So tomorrow you call at 3 p.m. to register today, from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. So the Government Organization Committee will be holding a public hearing, a virtual public hearing, and you'll call today from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. with your email, name, and entity you represent to be registered for the meeting. The details will be posted on the committee's webpage, and that public hearing will be held at 3 p.m. tomorrow. On HCR 9.
Gentleman from the 17th, Delegate Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet today in the House Government Organization Room at 3:15. I repeat, 3:15. The Republican members of the committee will caucus in the chairman's office at 3 p.m. So caucus at 3 p.m., meeting at 3:15. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from the 10th, Jay Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Energy and Manufacturing will meet today at 3 p.m. in the House chambers. The agenda is posted. Republican members will caucus in the Vice Chair's office, room 201E at 2:30. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 22nd, Delegate Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Tomorrow, your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet immediately after floor session. That's immediately after floor session. Also, your subcommittee on naming of bridges and resolutions will be immediately after that meeting. Okay? Thank you.
Delegate from the 18th, Delegate Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning at 10:30 in the McManus Room, that's room 252. Anybody who wishes to join the Congressional Prayer Caucus, we will have a meeting there at 10:30 with our colleagues from the Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 13th, Delegate Higginbotham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will be meeting today at 2 p.m. in the House chamber. 2 p.m. in the House chamber. The agenda is posted.
Gentleman from the 3rd, Delegate Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First off, I speak for everybody here. You are looking good up there in that green. Tell you what. And the Democrats will caucus briefly in room 252 immediately following session.
Gentleman from the 37th, Delegate Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Democratic members of the Committee on Health and Human Resources will caucus at 2:45 in the conference room in 151.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question on the motion to adjourn until 11 a.m. on Friday, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the House adjourned.